I can't build a future with a man who has none.
You decided that before I came home. This transfer used credentials I didn't have yet. Then who planned your arrival? Someone who knew you would call me.
Kevin Perez was 42 years old, a senior systems engineer who had quietly disappeared from the payroll of a Chicago technology company after 19 years of loyal service. By sunset, most people around him had already decided his story was over. The neighbors saw only a man with an aging Toyota Camry, a neatly trimmed lawn, and the same $5 coffee every morning. What nobody knew was that one of America's most powerful billionaires had spent years waiting for the right moment to call him again. As Penelope carried her final suitcase through the front door, Kevin's phone vibrated once. The screen lit up with a single name, Richard Calloway. If you're watching from somewhere in the world, let me know your country and your local time. In the comments, I always enjoy seeing where everyone is watching from. And if you love stories filled with unexpected twists, quiet strength, and satisfying justice, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss tomorrow's story. 3 weeks earlier, Kevin Perez woke up before sunrise without an alarm. His routine had not changed in nearly 20 years. At 5:45 every morning, he brewed a pot of black coffee in the same stainless steel machine that had survived 2 kitchen remodels. While the coffee dripped into a chipped navy blue mug, he checked the weather through the window above the sink. Chicago's March sky looked heavy, wrapped in low gray clouds drifting over Lake Michigan. He buttoned a light blue shirt tied a conservative navy tie and slipped on the same polished brown shoes he had worn for years. They were old, but spotless. Penelope walked into the kitchen just as Kevin zipped his laptop bag. "You'll be late," she said while looking at her phone instead of him. Kevin smiled faintly. "I won't." That was all. He kissed her lightly on the forehead before leaving the house. She barely noticed. Traffic moved slowly along Interstate 94. Kevin never minded morning traffic. It gave him time to think. His Toyota Camry rolled into the employee parking garage at Lakeshore Integrated Systems just before 7:30. For 19 years, this building had been part of his identity. He knew every security guard by name, every maintenance worker, every receptionist. When he stepped through the revolving doors, something immediately felt different. People were quieter. Groups gathered in corners. Nobody laughed near the coffee station. Several employees looked down at their phones before quickly looking away. Kevin noticed everything. He simply didn't react immediately. Inside the elevator, his coworker Melissa forced a smile. "Morning?" "Morning. You hear anything?" Kevin shook his head. "No." The elevator climbed in silence. On the 12th floor, the engineering department looked unusually empty. Managers moved between offices carrying sealed envelopes. At exactly 8 o'clock, every employee received the same calendar notification. Mandatory department meeting, conference room A. No agenda, no explanation. Kevin carried his notebook inside. More than 80 employees filled the room. No one spoke above a whisper. A projector displayed only the company logo. 5 minutes later, Thomas Reynolds entered. Normally confident, the engineering director looked 10 years older. He placed both hands on the podium. "I'm going to keep this brief." Nobody moved. "The board approved a company-wide restructuring last night." The room became completely silent. "Several departments are being consolidated." A woman near the back quietly began crying before Thomas had even finished. "Approximately 400 positions will be eliminated today." Kevin watched Thomas instead of the screen. His former director wasn't reading mechanically. He was struggling. "This decision wasn't based on performance," someone interrupted. "Then what was it based on?" Thomas inhaled slowly. "Artificial intelligence integration, outsourced infrastructure, and budget reduction." More questions erupted. None received satisfying answers. Thomas finally looked directly toward Kevin. Just for a second? That single glance told Kevin everything. His name was on the list. 1 hour later, employees were called individually into human resources. Kevin entered conference room 3, carrying nothing except a legal pad. Thomas stood beside an HR representative named Linda Carter. Neither smiled. Linda slid a folder across the table. "I'm very sorry, Kevin." He opened it. Severance agreement. Continuation of benefits. Career transition services. 19 years summarized in 43 printed pages. Thomas spoke quietly. "I argued against this." Kevin looked up. "I know." "They wouldn't move." "I know." "They're making a mistake." Kevin offered the smallest nod. "Maybe." Thomas leaned forward. "For what it's worth," Kevin interrupted gently, "you don't have to explain." The words surprised Thomas. There was no bitterness, no accusation, no raised voice, only acceptance. Kevin signed where instructed. He shook both their hands before standing. Linda blinked. "You're taking this remarkably well." Kevin answered honestly. "Being angry won't change today's date." He picked up a small cardboard box waiting outside the room. Inside were 19 years reduced to a handful of belongings, a framed photograph from an employee softball championship, 2 engineering textbooks, a ceramic coffee mug that read "World's Okayest Programmer," a family picture taken beside Lake Michigan 8 summers earlier, a tiny potted cactus someone had given him during his 10th work anniversary. He carried the box through the office one last time. People avoided eye contact. Some cried. Others hugged coworkers. Kevin simply walked. At the lobby security desk, Officer Martinez stood up. "I heard." Kevin nodded. "Take care of yourself." "You too." Outside, cold wind swept across the parking lot. Kevin placed the cardboard box in the Camry's trunk before sitting behind the steering wheel. He didn't start the engine immediately. He rested both hands on the wheel. 19 years. Finished before lunchtime. For the first time that day, uncertainty reached him. Not panic, not fear. Just silence. His thoughts moved toward practical questions. Mortgage payment, health insurance, retirement account, job market. He opened his notebook. Instead of dwelling on what had happened, he wrote 4 simple lines. Update resume, call former contacts, review savings, tell Penelope tonight. He closed the notebook, then drove home. The house was unusually quiet when he arrived. Penelope returned just after 6. She placed designer shopping bags on the kitchen island before removing her sunglasses. "You got home early." Kevin nodded. "I did." She looked at him. Something in his face made her stop unpacking. "What happened?" "I was laid off." The sentence hung in the room. For 2 seconds, neither moved. Kevin expected questions. "Are you okay? What happened? How are you feeling?" Instead, Penelope asked something else. "How much is the severance package?" Kevin hesitated. "About 8 months' salary." She immediately calculated in her head. "And after that, I'll find another job." "How long will that take?" "I don't know." She folded her arms. "The mortgage is over $4,000. "I know." "The country clubs renew memberships in June." "I know." "Our vacation to Napa is already booked." Kevin remained calm. "We may need to postpone some things." Her expression changed. "Postpone? For a little while?" She laughed once. Not because it was funny, because she couldn't believe what she had heard. "My friends already know we're going." Kevin looked at her carefully. "I think they'll understand." She looked away. "I'm not worried they'll understand." Kevin didn't answer. She finally said what she had really been thinking. "They're going to think we've failed." Kevin heard every word. He didn't defend himself. Inside, disappointment settled quietly across his thoughts. Not because he had lost his job, because he had finally seen what frightened his wife most. It wasn't uncertainty, it was appearance. After dinner, Kevin carried his laptop into the study. He opened his resume, updated certifications, added recent cybersecurity projects, removed obsolete software skills, sent applications to 6 companies before midnight. Each submission was carefully customized. No shortcuts, no complaints, just work. Downstairs, Penelope sat alone in the living room scrolling through social media. Photographs filled her screen. Luxury vacations, new cars, business galas, perfect smiles, perfect lives. Her thumb stopped on one profile. Bradley Stone, successful real estate developer, luxury condominiums across downtown Chicago, private charity events, magazine interviews. She had met him 6 months earlier during a fundraising dinner. Almost immediately, a notification appeared. Bradley Stone. Hope you're doing well. She stared at the message, then typed, Doing okay. Another reply arrived almost instantly. Dinner tomorrow, I know a place you'll like. Penelope looked toward the upstairs hallway. Kevin remained inside the study, quietly editing another job application. She locked her phone, then unlocked it again. After several long seconds, she typed only one word. Yes. Upstairs, Kevin clicked Submit on his 7th application of the evening. He had no idea that downstairs another decision had just been made, one that would begin destroying his marriage long before either of them admitted it. The first dinner happened on a Thursday. Kevin never knew where Penelope went. She told him she had accepted an invitation from a client who wanted to discuss a possible charity partnership. I probably won't be home until late, she said while fastening a pair of diamond earrings in the hallway mirror. Kevin glanced up from the kitchen table where job listings covered nearly every inch of the wood. Drive safely. She expected another question. There wasn't one. She picked up her purse. You don't want to know where I'm going? Kevin closed the laptop. If you wanted me to know, you would have already told me. For a brief second, Penelope hesitated. Then she smiled politely. I'll see you later. The front door closed. Kevin listened to the silence for several moments before returning to another application. He had already submitted 23 resumes in 12 days. 8 companies had acknowledged receiving them. 4 had rejected him. The rest remained silent. He adjusted another cover letter. Every sentence was written carefully. He refused to send generic applications. Outside rain tapped softly against the windows. Downtown Chicago glowed beneath wet streets, while Penelope stepped out of a black, luxury SUV in front of the signature room. Bradley Stone greeted her with effortless confidence. He wore an expensive charcoal overcoat. His watch alone probably cost more than Kevin's car. You look incredible, Bradley said. So do you, he smiled. I reserved the best table. Neither mentioned Kevin. Not yet. Across the city, Kevin heated leftover chicken soup. He ate alone while watching local news without really hearing it. The anchor spoke about layoffs affecting thousands of technology workers across Illinois. Kevin muted the television. Statistics changed nothing. He finished dinner, washed every dish, wiped the kitchen counters, then returned upstairs. Routine gave structure to uncertainty. He valued that. 3 days later, Penelope attended another dinner. This time she claimed it was a networking event. Then another, then a charity gala, then an investor reception. Each explanation sounded reasonable on its own. Together, they formed a pattern. Kevin noticed patterns for a living. He never ignored them. He simply refused to draw conclusions before facts existed. Weeks passed. The distance inside the house became measurable. Morning conversations rarely lasted more than a minute. Dinner became optional. Sometimes Penelope claimed she had already eaten. Sometimes Kevin wasn't hungry enough to cook. The home remained spotless, quiet, cold. One Saturday morning, Kevin found himself mowing the lawn while Penelope sat on the patio scrolling through her phone. The engine drowned out everything else. When he finished, sweat darkened the back of his faded t-shirt. He noticed her smiling at the screen. Not once. Repeatedly. She quickly locked the phone when she realized he was walking toward the porch. "Everything okay?" She looked almost startled. "Fine," Kevin nodded. "I'll wash up." Nothing more. Inside the bathroom mirror, he studied his own reflection. Dark circles beneath tired eyes, a few new gray hairs above his temples. He looked older than a month earlier. Not defeated, simply exhausted. He reminded himself that uncertainty often aged people faster than time. The following Monday, an email finally arrived. A first-round interview. A mid-sized software company in Naperville. The salary was lower than his previous position. Kevin accepted immediately. Work mattered more than pride. He printed directions, prepared technical notes, pressed his only Navy suit. When Penelope came downstairs that evening, Kevin shared the news. "I have an interview Wednesday." She looked up briefly. "What company?" he told her. "I've never heard of them." "They're growing." "What's the salary?" Kevin mentioned the approximate range. Her expression hardened. "That's almost 40% less. It would be temporary." "You hope." "I'll keep looking." She sighed. "Kevin." He waited. "I don't think you understand." "What?" "Our lives can't keep moving backward." He answered quietly. "I'm trying to keep us moving forward." She looked unconvinced. Wednesday arrived. Kevin drove 45 minutes through heavy traffic. The interview lasted nearly 3 hours. Technical assessments, behavioral questions, architecture discussions. By the time he returned home, he felt cautiously optimistic. Someone had finally seen his abilities instead of his unemployment. The house was empty. A handwritten note rested on the kitchen island. "Dinner with clients. Don't wait up." Kevin folded the note carefully before throwing it away. He cooked pasta. After eating, he opened the household budgeting spreadsheet. Numbers replaced emotion. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, emergency savings, retirement. Every expense was categorized. The savings would comfortably cover almost a year without changing their lifestyle. Longer, if necessary. Financially, they were safe. Emotionally, they were not. The next morning, Kevin checked the mailbox. Among the usual advertisements sat an envelope from the credit card company. He opened it while walking back toward the front door. The monthly statement had arrived. Normally, Penelope managed the household card. Kevin rarely reviewed it. Today he did. Not because he distrusted her, because unemployment required attention to every dollar. Several transactions appeared ordinary. Groceries, gas, utilities. Then one charge caught his eye. The Marlowe Grand Hotel. $872. Kevin frowned. Business meetings sometimes happened in hotels. He kept reading. Valet parking, restaurant, private lounge. Another evening, another hotel, another restaurant. No accusations entered his thoughts, only questions. He placed the statement inside a folder labeled Household Finances. Nothing else. That weekend he noticed something different. A small velvet jewelry box sat on Penelope's dresser. It hadn't been there before. He wasn't searching. She had left it open. Inside rested a gold bracelet, elegant, expensive, far beyond anything they had recently purchased. Later that evening, he asked one simple question. "That's a beautiful bracelet." She glanced toward it. "Oh, one of the women at the charity auction was selling jewelry." "You bought it?" She hesitated. "It was discounted." Kevin nodded once. "It looks nice." He said nothing else. Inside, however, another quiet observation settled into place. The following Tuesday, Kevin stopped at the bank to transfer money between accounts. While waiting, the teller apologized. "Son." "I'm sorry, Mr. Perez. There's a temporary hold because of several unusually large credit card payments." Kevin thanked her. No irritation. No embarrassment. He completed the transfer. Back in his car, he reviewed online banking records. The amounts matched the statement. Restaurants, luxury stores, hotel charges. Everything occurred on evenings Penelope had claimed to be attending business functions. Still, patterns were not proof. Kevin downloaded every monthly statement into encrypted folders. Date, time, amount, merchant, no comments, no assumptions. Just records. Years of cybersecurity work had taught him something valuable. Memory was weak. Evidence remained. That night, Penelope arrived after 10. Her perfume lingered in the hallway long before she spoke. Kevin looked up from a technical certification course he had been studying online. Long day. She placed her keys on the counter. You could say that. She noticed several folders spread across the dining table. What are those? Our finances. She immediately became cautious. Why? I'm organizing everything while I'm between jobs. You don't trust me. Kevin looked directly at her. I trust documents more than memory. She laughed nervously. That's such an engineer thing to say. It probably is. Neither smiled. Silence settled between them. Finally, Penelope walked toward the staircase. Halfway up, she stopped without turning around. I've been thinking. Kevin waited. I don't think this marriage is working anymore. The words arrived without warning, without anger, without tears. Kevin closed the folder in front of him before speaking. Have you already made your decision? She stood motionless for several seconds, then slowly nodded. Yes. Kevin lowered his eyes for only a moment. When he looked up again, his voice remained calm. Then I won't try to force you to stay. Penelope seemed almost disappointed by the absence of a fight. She continued upstairs. Kevin remained alone at the dining table. The folder containing every financial record rested beneath his hand. For the first time since losing his job, he no longer believed unemployment was the greatest challenge standing before him. Something much deeper had already begun to break. Kevin barely slept. Not because Penelope had said she wanted a divorce. He had sensed that moment approaching long before she finally spoke the words aloud. The sentence itself changed very little. It simply confirmed what silence had already been saying for weeks. The next morning he woke at the usual hour, coffee, shower, fresh shirt. Even though he no longer had an office to report to, routine remained the strongest defense against uncertainty. Penelope came downstairs carrying 2 empty moving boxes. Kevin looked at them for a moment before returning to the newspaper folded beside his coffee. So you're starting today? He said quietly. She stopped. I hired movers for tomorrow. I see. I'll pack everything myself. Kevin nodded once. Let me know if you need help. She stared at him. You really aren't going to argue? I don't think arguments change decisions. Her expression tightened. They change some. Not the ones already made. She carried the boxes upstairs. Kevin remained seated. Outside, a pair of robins hopped across the damp front lawn. Inside, another chapter of his life was ending with almost no sound. By noon, every bedroom closet stood open. Cardboard boxes lined the hallway. Tape tore through the quiet house every few minutes. Kevin spent most of the afternoon in the study applying for more engineering positions. Every so often, he heard another drawer slide shut upstairs. Every sound reminded him that the home they had built together was slowly becoming unfamiliar. Late in the afternoon, he walked upstairs carrying a stack of folded packing paper. You forgot these. Penelope accepted them. Thanks. Neither moved for several seconds. Kevin's eyes drifted across the bedroom. Half the closet was empty. Family photographs had disappeared from the shelves. Her favorite reading chair stood alone in the corner. Only faint rectangular marks remained where pictures had once hung. The room already looked like someone else's house. I'll leave the bedroom set, she said. You don't have to. I don't want it. Kevin simply nodded. He noticed several jewelry cases resting inside one of the boxes. Among them sat the gold bracelet he had quietly observed weeks earlier. He said nothing. Not because he hadn't noticed, because there was no reason to. Facts did not become stronger through repetition. That evening, Penelope ordered takeout. Neither wanted to cook. The food arrived in plain, white containers. They ate at opposite ends of the dining table. Forks occasionally touched porcelain. Otherwise, the room remained silent. Finally, Penelope placed her fork down. "I've signed the divorce paperwork." Kevin swallowed slowly before answering. "When?" "Yesterday." "You already have an attorney?" "Yes." Kevin looked toward the window. Rain drifted across the backyard. "I figured. You figured. I noticed several withdrawals from our joint account." She looked surprised. "You checked. I reviewed our finances." "Because you thought I was cheating?" Kevin shook his head. "No." "Then why?" "Because losing a job means understanding every dollar." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "I wasn't trying to hide the attorney." "I know." She studied him carefully. "There really isn't anything you want to ask me." Kevin thought for a moment, then spoke. "Only one question." She waited. "When did you stop believing we were on the same team?" For the first time in weeks, Penelope struggled to answer immediately. "I don't know." Kevin believed her. Not because the answer satisfied him, because sometimes people truly didn't know the exact day something ended. She finally looked directly at him. "I just couldn't keep pretending everything would be okay." Kevin answered calmly. "I never asked you to pretend." "No, you just stopped believing." Neither continued. The conversation ended there. The following morning, the moving truck arrived shortly after 9. 2 uniformed movers began carrying furniture toward the driveway. Neighbors slowed their morning walks. Curtains shifted across nearby windows. No one approached the house. Everyone watched. Mrs. Henderson from next door eventually crossed the lawn carrying a small plate covered with aluminum foil. "I baked blueberry muffins." Kevin smiled warmly. "Thank you." "I'm sorry." "So am I." She squeezed his arm gently before leaving. No questions, no gossip, only kindness. Kevin appreciated that. Around noon, another vehicle arrived. A black luxury SUV, polished so perfectly it reflected the entire street. Bradley Stone stepped out wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy weather. His tailored coat looked expensive. His shoes never touched a puddle. He glanced once toward the moving truck before walking confidently up the driveway. Kevin was carrying another box toward the garage when Bradley stopped several feet away. "You must be Kevin." Kevin set the box down carefully. "I am." Bradley extended his hand. Kevin shook it politely. "I've heard a lot about you." Kevin answered with complete neutrality. "I imagine you have." There was no challenge, no sarcasm, no hostility. Bradley seemed almost disappointed. "I hope there won't be any unnecessary complications." Kevin looked at him steadily. "From me?" Bradley nodded. "There won't." The real estate developer smiled. "I appreciate that." Kevin picked up the box again. "So do I." That ended the conversation. Bradley walked inside. Kevin continued toward the garage. Nothing more needed to be said. Inside the house, Penelope carried another suitcase downstairs. She paused when she saw both men had already finished speaking. "Everything okay?" Kevin answered first. "Everything's fine." Bradley smiled. "We were just introducing ourselves." Kevin looked toward Penelope. "I'll put your last suitcase in the vehicle." She almost objected. Instead, she handed him the handle. Together, they walked outside. The neighborhood had become unusually quiet. Kevin lifted the suitcase into the cargo area of the SUV. The lid closed with a soft, mechanical click. Penelope stood beside the passenger door. She looked back at the house. For nearly 15 years it had been home. Now it looked strangely distant. Kevin noticed uncertainty flicker across her face, only for a second. Then it disappeared. She turned toward him. I hope. Someday. The sentence never finished. Kevin spared her the effort. I hope you find what you're looking for. His voice contained neither resentment nor affection, only honesty. She nodded slowly. I hope you do too. Bradley climbed behind the wheel. The engine started. Penelope opened the passenger door. Before sitting down, she looked at Kevin one final time. I really think you deserve someone who wants the same future. Kevin answered quietly. I thought I already had. The words landed softly, without accusation, without anger. They seemed to affect her more than shouting ever could. She lowered her eyes before entering the SUV. The vehicle rolled slowly down the driveway, turned left, disappeared beyond the row of maple trees. Kevin remained standing until the taillights vanished completely. Then he walked back inside. Silence filled every room. The living room echoed differently, without half the furniture. The bedroom closet stood half empty. One coffee mug remained beside the sink. A single toothbrush rested in the upstairs bathroom. He closed the front door gently, locked it. Leaning briefly against the wood, Kevin closed his eyes. The house no longer felt broken. It felt unfinished. He carried the remaining dishes into the kitchen, straightened 2 chairs, folded the blanket lying across the sofa. Small tasks, simple movements. Order helped him think. On the dining table rested the unopened envelope containing divorce papers. Beside it sat the folder holding every financial statement he had quietly collected over the past month. He looked at neither. Instead, he walked toward the window overlooking the front yard. Clouds drifted slowly across the afternoon sky. His phone lay forgotten on the kitchen counter. Then, without warning, it vibrated once. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. Chicago area code. Kevin almost ignored it. Instead, he answered. This is Kevin Perez. There was a brief pause. Then came the calm, unmistakably older voice. Kevin, this is Richard Calloway. Kevin's expression changed for the first time all day. Not because he recognized the name, because he recognized the voice. 8 years had passed. He never expected to hear it again. Kevin lowered himself into the kitchen chair without taking his eyes off the window. For several seconds, he said nothing. Not because he doubted what he had heard, because hearing that voice again felt impossible. The older man spoke first. I suppose this isn't the best day of your life. A faint smile crossed Kevin's face. You always had good timing, Mr. Calloway. Richard laughed quietly. I've been called many things over the years. Timing isn't usually one of them. Kevin leaned back. It's been a long time. 8 years. You remember. I remember every person who refused to profit from doing the right thing. Silence settled between them. Neither man seemed uncomfortable with it. Richard finally continued. I heard about your job. Kevin frowned slightly. News travels quickly. It does when people are looking. Kevin considered those words carefully. You've been looking for years. Kevin stared toward the empty living room where Penelope's favorite chair had stood only hours earlier. I didn't know. I never intended for you to know. The answer sounded entirely consistent with the man Kevin remembered. Richard Calloway had never believed gratitude required publicity. Years earlier, he had proven that. Kevin closed his eyes briefly as memories returned. 8 years before, he had been 34, still relatively unknown inside Lakeshore Integrated Systems. Most of his days were spent monitoring network traffic, reviewing security reports, and solving problems before anyone else noticed they existed. Late one Tuesday evening, Nearly everyone had gone home. Kevin remained behind. A strange series of encrypted data packets had begun moving through an external network. The activity looked ordinary, until it didn't. Every few minutes, another tiny stream appeared, each one too small to trigger automatic alerts, too consistent to ignore. Kevin began tracing the connections manually. 3 hours later, he discovered something alarming. The traffic wasn't targeting his employer. It was passing quietly through their infrastructure toward another company, Calloway Dynamics, one of America's largest industrial technology corporations. Someone was using trusted business connections to disguise an attack. Kevin continued tracing. The deeper he looked, the worse everything became. The attack wasn't simple espionage. It was coordinated, patient, designed to activate simultaneously across multiple manufacturing facilities. If successful, production would stop nationwide. Supply chains could collapse. The financial damage alone would likely reach billions. Kevin immediately contacted his supervisor. No answer. Nearly midnight. He called again. Voicemail. Company policy required reporting through management. Time was disappearing. Kevin looked at the countdown script hidden inside the malicious code. Less than 5 hours remained. He made a decision, one that technically exceeded his authority. He called Calloway Dynamics directly. The operator almost disconnected him twice. Eventually, someone from corporate security answered. Kevin spoke calmly. "I believe your network has been compromised." The security manager sounded skeptical. "What company are you with?" Kevin explained. "What evidence do you have?" Kevin listed server addresses, encryption signatures, traffic patterns, access points. The conversation changed immediately. "Stay on the line." Within minutes, several engineers joined the call. Questions became increasingly technical. Kevin answered each one. At 2:17 that morning, someone interrupted. "Mr. Perez." "Yes, we've confirmed everything." The room on the other end became unusually quiet. Then another voice appeared, older, measured, confident. "This is Richard Calloway." Kevin had recognized the name immediately. Everyone in American manufacturing knew it. Richard spoke without introducing himself further. "My people tell me you may have just prevented the largest cyber attack in this company's history." Kevin answered honestly. "I only noticed unusual traffic." Richard laughed softly. "Most people would have ignored it." "They shouldn't." "What do you need from us?" "Nothing." The billionaire paused. "Nothing? Just fix the problem." Richard had remained silent for several moments. Finally, he said something Kevin never forgot. "The world has too many people asking what they deserve. And very few asking what is right." The attack had been stopped before sunrise. Federal investigators eventually became involved. Several international arrests followed months later. Kevin never appeared in any news report. His name never surfaced publicly, exactly as he had requested. A week after the incident, Richard invited him to dinner at his North Shore estate. Kevin almost declined. Curiosity changed his mind. The estate overlooked Lake Michigan. Elegant, private, nothing excessive despite Richard's immense fortune. Dinner lasted nearly 3 hours. They discussed technology, history, leadership, family. Almost nothing about money. At the end of the evening, Richard presented Kevin with an envelope. Inside rested a check, 7 figures. Kevin quietly slid it back across the table. Richard studied him. "Not enough." Kevin smiled. "It's too much." "You earned it." "I did my job." Richard leaned back. "You went far beyond your job." Kevin shook his head. "If I accept this eventually, I'll start believing I acted because of the reward." "And you didn't." "No." "Why?" Kevin answered without hesitation. "Because someone would have lost everything if I hadn't called." Richard never forgot that sentence. Instead of insisting, he folded the check. then handed Kevin a plain white business card. No amount of money can repay integrity. Kevin accepted the card. If you ever need me, Richard pointed toward the card. Call. Kevin thanked him, then placed the card inside his wallet. Years passed. He never used it. The memory faded into the background of ordinary life. Until today. Back in the present, Kevin opened the drawer beside the refrigerator. Inside lay an old leather wallet he rarely carried anymore. He searched one compartment, then another. Finally, he found it. A simple ivory-colored business card. No logo, no slogan, only one name. Richard Calloway. One phone number, nothing else. Kevin looked at it in disbelief. I still have your card. Richard chuckled. I knew you would. You seem very certain. I've always trusted your habits. Kevin smiled faintly. You've been watching. I've been paying attention. Richard's voice became more serious. I know about your layoff. I know about the divorce papers. Kevin looked toward the empty hallway. You know a great deal. I also know you haven't told anyone about what happened 8 years ago. I gave my word. And you kept it. Richard paused. Exactly as I expected. Kevin finally asked the question that had been forming since the phone rang. Why are you calling now? The older man's answer came immediately. Because I've been waiting for the day you became available. Kevin blinked. Available? My company needs someone. I'm looking for engineering work. I'm not offering engineering work. Kevin remained silent. Richard continued. I'm offering responsibility. I don't understand. You will. Another pause. I'd like you to come to Calloway Dynamics tomorrow morning. For an interview, Richard laughed. No. What then? A conversation. Kevin glanced at the stack of rejection letters resting beside his laptop. You've probably heard I haven't worked for almost a month. I have. My resume doesn't exactly look impressive right now. It looks exactly the way I expected. Kevin frowned. I'm not following. The world sees a man who lost his job. Richard's voice became slower. I see the same man who once protected an entire corporation without asking for recognition. Kevin said nothing. Richard continued. Tell me honestly. All right. Have you changed? Kevin thought carefully before answering. No. Good. Why? Because neither have I. Another silence followed. Then Richard spoke with unmistakable conviction. There are people inside my company I no longer trust. Kevin's attention sharpened immediately. I need someone whose judgment cannot be purchased. The words carried unusual weight. This isn't about cybersecurity alone, is it? No. What is it about? I'd rather discuss that in person. Kevin stood and walked toward the living room window. Clouds drifted across the evening sky. His life had collapsed within a month. His marriage had ended that afternoon. Now the most powerful businessman he had ever met was asking him to visit headquarters. When? 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I don't even own a proper suit anymore. I've never hired clothing. Kevin couldn't help smiling. Richard heard it. There's the Kevin I remember. I'll be there. I knew you would. The line went quiet. Just before ending the call, Richard spoke once more. Oh, Kevin. Yes. Bring the same notebook you carried 8 years ago. Kevin looked toward the small leather notebook still resting on his desk upstairs. He had used it every day since. I still have it. I never doubted that. The call ended. Kevin remained standing in the silent house, the phone still in his hand. Outside dusk settled over the neighborhood. Inside, for the first time since losing everything, the future no longer looked empty. It looked unknown. And unknown was something Kevin Perez had learned to navigate better than almost anyone. Kevin arrived at Calloway Dynamics 40 minutes early. Old habits refused to disappear. The headquarters occupied nearly an entire block along the Chicago River. 42 floors of glass and steel reflected the pale morning sky. Employees streamed through the revolving doors carrying laptops, coffee cups, and security badges. Kevin parked his aging Toyota Camry between two luxury sedans in the visitor garage. He looked at the dashboard clock. 8:18 a.m. His navy suit had been pressed carefully the night before. The leather notebook Richard had mentioned rested inside his worn briefcase. Nothing about him suggested he was walking into one of the largest privately owned corporations in America. He preferred it that way. Inside the lobby, polished marble stretched toward a reception desk nearly 40 feet long. The receptionist smiled professionally. "Good morning. Welcome to Calloway Dynamics." "Good morning. May I help you?" "My name is Kevin Perez." She typed only his first name before stopping. Her expression changed almost instantly. "Oh." She looked back at the screen to verify what she had just read. "Mr. Perez." "Yes." "Mr. Calloway has been expecting you." Several nearby executives glanced toward Kevin without understanding why the receptionist had suddenly become unusually attentive. She stood instead of remaining seated. "Please allow me." Kevin raised a hand politely. "You don't have to." "I've been instructed that I do." She picked up the phone. "This is reception. Mr. Perez has arrived." She listened for several seconds. "Yes, sir." After hanging up, she smiled again. "Someone will be here in just a moment." Kevin thanked her and stepped aside. He noticed details almost automatically. Security cameras positioned to eliminate blind spots, visitor badges encoded with RFID chips, separate elevator access levels, 3 security officers watching the lobby without appearing obvious. Efficient, quiet, well-designed. Less than a minute later, a woman in her early 50s approached. Gray business suit, tablet in one hand, confident stride. "Mr. Perez." "Yes." "I'm Evelyn Brooks, Chief of Staff." They shook hands. "Mr. Calloway asked me to personally escort you." Kevin followed her toward a private elevator, requiring biometric authorization. As the doors closed, Evelyn looked toward him. "You've met Mr. Calloway before." "Years ago." "He doesn't personally invite many people." Kevin smiled faintly. "I've noticed." The elevator climbed quickly. Floor 20, 30, 38, 42. The doors opened onto an executive floor unlike the rest of the building. There were no cubicles, no reception desks, only quiet hallways lined with artwork and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Evelyn stopped before double oak doors. "He'll see you now." Kevin thanked her. She smiled. "I think he's been waiting for this meeting longer than you realize." Kevin entered. Richard Calloway stood beside the windows overlooking the river. At 72, his posture remained straight. Silver hair, dark blue suit. No unnecessary display of wealth. He turned as Kevin approached. For a brief moment, neither man spoke. Then Richard extended both hands instead of one. "It's good to see you again." Kevin shook them. "You too." Richard studied him carefully. "You've aged." Kevin smiled. "So have you." Richard laughed. "Good. You're still willing to tell me the truth." They sat near the windows. Coffee had already been prepared. Richard poured 2 cups himself. "I remember how you take it." "Black." "Exactly." Kevin accepted the mug. "Thank you." Richard sat opposite him. "I read every annual report your previous employer published." Kevin looked surprised. "I wasn't mentioned." "I wasn't reading the reports." Richard smiled. "I was reading the cybersecurity incidents." Kevin understood immediately. There weren't many. "There were almost none." Richard nodded. "That's because someone prevented most of them before they became incidents." Kevin remained silent. Richard leaned forward. Do you know why I admire engineers? They solve problems. No. Richard shook his head. The best engineers remove problems before anyone notices they existed. He pointed gently toward Kevin. You've always been one of those. Kevin looked out the window for a moment. I was simply doing my work. I know. Richard's expression became more serious. And that's exactly why you're here. He opened a thin leather folder. Inside were several organizational charts, financial reports, photographs, meeting schedules. Kevin recognized none of the names. Richard slid one page across the table. Our company has grown significantly. Kevin looked at the figures. Annual revenue exceeded $40 billion, more than 60,000 employees, facilities across 5 countries. Richard continued. Growth creates opportunities. Kevin nodded. It also creates weaknesses. Exactly. Richard smiled. You haven't changed. He pointed toward another page. This is our executive leadership team. 9 names, 9 photographs. Richard tapped 3 of them. I trust these people with my life. Then he tapped 2 others. I trust them with business. Finally, his finger rested on the remaining 4. I no longer know. Kevin looked carefully at the photographs. What changed? Success. Richard folded his hands. Money doesn't reveal character. Kevin looked up. What does it reveal? It removes excuses. The room became quiet. Richard continued. I've spent the last 18 months noticing decisions that don't make sense. Kevin listened. Projects costing twice their budget. Suppliers selected despite lower performance. Contracts approved without proper review. Internal reports disappearing. Kevin asked the obvious question. Fraud. I don't know. You suspect it? I do. Kevin looked down at the folder again. Why not hire investigators? I have. What happened? They found nothing. Auditors. Nothing. Outside consultants. They produced beautiful presentations. Richard's tone remained calm. No answers. Kevin slowly closed the folder. So why me? Richard stood and walked toward the windows. Because everyone investigates by looking for guilty people. He turned. You investigate systems. Kevin considered that carefully. Richard continued. You don't begin with conclusions. You begin with evidence, Kevin said quietly. Evidence usually tells the truth. Richard smiled. Exactly. He returned to the table. I don't need another executive. I don't need another consultant. I need someone who notices what everyone else walks past. Kevin remained thoughtful. Richard watched him closely. I assume there's more. There is. Richard opened another folder. This one contained no financial reports, only newspaper clippings, magazine interviews, charity photographs, corporate event invitations. Kevin frowned. I don't understand. You will. Richard slid one magazine across the table. The cover featured Bradley Stone, Chicago's fastest-rising real estate visionary. Kevin's expression remained neutral. Richard noticed. You know him, Kevin answered carefully. I've met him. Richard looked directly into his eyes. Your wife left with him yesterday. Kevin did not react outwardly. Richard noticed that too. I had investigators watching Stone for reasons unrelated to you. Kevin finally spoke. You already knew. I knew they had been meeting. For how long? Approximately 4 months. Kevin absorbed the answer silently. Richard continued. I considered telling you. Why didn't you? Because personal relationships require personal choices. Kevin nodded once. I appreciate that. Richard looked almost relieved. I thought you might. He handed Kevin another photograph. Bradley leaving an office building. Another man walking beside him. Neither looked toward the camera. "Who's this?" Richard answered quietly. "Martin Doyle."
No.
"The chief financial officer?" "Yes." Kevin looked back at the organizational chart. Martin Doyle was one of the 4 executives Richard no longer trusted. Another photograph. Bradley shaking hands with a construction supplier. Another. Bradley entering a private club with 2 Calloway executives. Another. Bradley leaving a restaurant carrying a leather portfolio. Kevin arranged the photographs into neat rows across the table. "What exactly does Bradley Stone do for your company?" Richard answered. "Officially?" "Yes." "Nothing." Kevin looked up slowly. "And unofficially?" Richard met his eyes. "That's precisely what I need you to discover." The room became completely silent. Kevin looked from the photographs to the financial reports, then back to Richard. "You believe my divorce and your investigation are connected?" Richard answered with complete certainty. "I no longer believe in coincidences." Kevin's thoughts moved carefully through every detail he had collected over the past month. Hotel charges, luxury gifts, secret meetings, financial records. Everything suddenly seemed larger than a failing marriage. Richard folded his hands. "I'll ask only once." Kevin waited. "Will you help me?" Kevin looked out over Chicago. Yesterday he had been an unemployed engineer standing alone in an empty house. Today he sat 42 floors above the city, with evidence suggesting that the man who had entered his wife's life might also be standing dangerously close to one of the largest corporate fraud schemes in the country. He closed his notebook, then looked directly at Richard. "My answer depends on one thing." Richard raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Kevin's voice remained calm. "I won't accuse anyone until the evidence does." A slow smile spread across Richard Calloway's face. "That's exactly why I chose you." Kevin arrived before sunrise the following morning. Downtown Chicago was still wrapped in a pale blue haze, and only a handful of lights burned inside the towering headquarters of Calloway Dynamics. Cleaning crews moved quietly through the lobby, while security officers exchanged shifts. He preferred buildings before they filled with people. People carried opinions. Systems carried evidence. The receptionist smiled as he approached. "Good morning, Mr. Perez." "Good morning." She handed him a visitor coffee voucher before remembering he no longer needed one. "You have full access now." Kevin smiled politely. "I noticed." He stepped into the private elevator alone. As the doors closed, he opened the leather notebook Richard had asked him to bring. One page contained only 6 words: patterns first, conclusions last. He had written them years ago after investigating a server breach that looked random, until every log entry had been placed in chronological order. The principle had never failed him. When he entered his office, the laptop had already synchronized overnight. Thousands of additional records were waiting: vendor databases, procurement approvals, executive calendars, email metadata, encrypted access logs. Most investigators would have begun with the financial statements. Kevin ignored them. Money moved because people made decisions. He wanted to understand the decisions first. He opened executive calendar records covering the previous 18 months. One by one, he removed every routine meeting, weekly operations, budget reviews, board meetings, holiday events. Only private appointments remained. Immediately, something unusual appeared. Martin Doyle, the chief financial officer, held recurring breakfast meetings every second Friday with outside consultants. The meetings lasted exactly 45 minutes, always at different restaurants, always marked strategic review. Nothing unusual by itself. Kevin highlighted the dates. Next, he opened the calendars of 3 senior procurement executives. Each one showed a private meeting within 24 hours of Martin's breakfast. Different locations, different names, almost identical timing. Coincidence possibly, He wrote another line inside the notebook. Repeated timing deserves attention, still no conclusions. His office phone rang. Kevin? It was Evelyn Brooks. Richard would like to see you after his 10 o'clock meeting. I'll be there. And one more thing. Yes. Victoria Calloway wants to meet you first. Kevin remembered Richard's daughter, general counsel, corporate attorney, highly respected, still skeptical. I'll come now. 5 minutes later, he entered her office. Victoria stood beside a wall-sized screen displaying legal timelines and organizational charts. She offered a professional handshake. Thank you for coming. My pleasure. She motioned toward a chair. I'll be direct. I prefer that. She studied him for several seconds. My father trusts you. He does. I don't. Kevin nodded. I understand. The answer seemed to surprise her. You aren't offended? No. Why not? You've never worked with me. She folded her arms. Exactly. I wouldn't trust someone I barely knew either. Victoria walked toward the windows. My father has built this company over 50 years. I know. He has become more cautious. Kevin remained silent. He rarely allows outsiders into confidential matters. She turned toward him. So tell me, what exactly did you do that earned this level of confidence? Kevin thought carefully. I answered a phone call 8 years ago. Victoria almost smiled. My father said you'd say something like that. He already told you. He told me you wouldn't exaggerate. Kevin simply nodded. Victoria placed a thick binder on the desk. This contains every internal investigation we've conducted during the last 3 years. Kevin looked at the binder. Have you read all of it? Twice. What did you find? Nothing that would survive a courtroom. She looked directly into his eyes. But something feels wrong. Kevin understood immediately. Lawyers needed proof. Engineers needed patterns. Sometimes one reached the destination before the other. I'll read it. Victoria hesitated. One warning. Kevin waited. If you accuse the wrong executive without evidence, this company could lose billions in shareholder confidence. I won't accuse anyone. She seemed satisfied. Good. Kevin picked up the binder. Before leaving, Victoria added one final sentence. My father believes character is the rarest qualification. She paused. I hope he's right. Back inside his office, Kevin opened the legal files. Anonymous complaints, internal audits, vendor disputes, whistleblower emails. Each investigation had ended the same way. Insufficient evidence. No further action. He ignored the conclusions. Instead, he created a spreadsheet. Column 1, date. Column 2, department. Column 3, executive involved. Column 4, outside vendor. Column 5, reason complaint was dismissed. Hours passed. The spreadsheet slowly filled. At first glance, every complaint appeared unrelated. Construction contracts, software licenses, equipment purchases, security consulting, legal retainers. Nothing connected. Until Kevin sorted everything by vendor. 3 names appeared repeatedly. Horizon Strategic Advisors, Stone Urban Development, Lakefront Procurement Solutions. He recognized one immediately. Stone Urban Development. Bradley Stone. Kevin leaned back. Bradley officially had no partnership with Calloway Dynamics. Yet his company's name appeared inside 6 separate procurement reviews. Not enough to prove anything. Enough to keep reading. He opened the oldest file. A warehouse redevelopment proposal. Rejected. Second file. Parking structure consultation. Approved. Third. Commercial property acquisition. Withdrawn without explanation. Kevin looked deeper. Every document involving Bradley had been reviewed personally by Martin Doyle. Again, Not proof, only another pattern. His office door opened softly. Richard entered without knocking. "You've been here 4 hours." Kevin checked the clock. "I lost track." Richard smiled. "A good sign." He noticed the whiteboard. Dates, names, colored lines. No conclusions. "You found something." "I've found repetition." Richard walked closer. Kevin pointed toward the board. "Martin Doyle appears repeatedly." Richard remained quiet. "So does Bradley Stone." Still no reaction. "And these 3 consulting firms." Richard folded his hands behind his back. "What do you think it means?" Kevin answered exactly as before. "I don't know." Richard laughed softly. "You're frustratingly disciplined." Kevin smiled faintly. "Evidence deserves patience." Richard nodded with approval. "I couldn't agree more." The billionaire reached into his jacket pocket and handed Kevin a sealed envelope. "Open it." Inside were copies of private flight manifests, hotel reservations, country club guest lists. Kevin looked puzzled. "These belong to Bradley Stone." Richard nodded. "My investigators collected them." Kevin scanned the dates. One entry immediately caught his attention. Private dinner, the Drake Hotel, guests, Martin Doyle, Bradley Stone, Penelope Perez. Kevin stopped reading. Richard watched him carefully. "You didn't know?" "No. It happened 6 weeks ago." Kevin looked at the page again. That date matched one of Penelope's supposed charity dinners. His chest tightened for only a moment. He forced himself to breathe slowly. Emotion changed nothing. The date remained the date. Richard spoke quietly. "I debated whether to show you. You made the right decision." "You aren't angry." Kevin closed the envelope. "I am." Richard waited. "But anger doesn't improve memory." He placed the manifest beside the growing collection of notes. "I'd rather understand why they were together." Richard nodded once. "Good." The office became quiet again. Kevin returned to his computer. This time he searched hotel reimbursement records. Nothing. Travel expenses. Nothing. Corporate entertainment. Nothing. Then he searched guest authorization requests. One result appeared. The reservation had not been paid directly by Calloway Dynamics. It had been arranged through Horizon Strategic Advisors, the same consulting company already connected to Martin Doyle. Kevin opened the registration file. The listed managing partner was a man named Andrew Mercer. No photograph. Minimal business history. Registered only 4 years earlier. Kevin searched public property records. No office building. Only a rented mailbox on the north side of Chicago. He searched tax filings. Almost non-existent payroll. Very little operating expense. Yet millions of dollars had flowed through the company. Legitimate consulting firms left footprints. This one barely existed. Kevin slowly closed the file. Another line went into his notebook. Money leaves traces. So do ghosts pretending to be companies. As evening approached, most employees left for home. Kevin remained in the quiet office reviewing one final document, a server access log. Someone had remotely downloaded hundreds of procurement records over the weekend. The account used belonged to Martin Doyle. The login location, however, came from a conference room inside Calloway Dynamics. According to Martin's own calendar, he had been attending an investment conference in New York at exactly the same time. Kevin read both records twice. One of them had to be false. Either the calendar had been deliberately altered, or someone inside the company was using Martin Doyle's credentials without his knowledge. For the first time since beginning the investigation, Kevin realized the truth might be far more complicated than a single dishonest executive. Someone inside Calloway Dynamics was not merely hiding evidence. Someone was carefully constructing a false trail. And whoever it was had been doing it for years. Kevin arrived at his office carrying 2 things, a black coffee, and a question he still could not answer. Was someone committing fraud inside Calloway Dynamics, Or was someone carefully directing suspicion toward the wrong people? Those were entirely different crimes. The second required far more intelligence. He set the coffee beside his keyboard and reopened every document connected to Horizon strategic advisors. Millions of dollars had flowed through the consulting company. Yet almost nothing about it resembled a legitimate business. The registered office was a rented mailbox. The listed employees barely existed online. Its tax filings showed almost no operating expenses. Still, none of that proved criminal activity. It proved only that the company deserved closer examination. Kevin opened another database. Vendor onboarding. Every company doing business with Calloway Dynamics completed the same process. Insurance verification, banking information, background checks, ownership disclosures, compliance certifications. Most files contained hundreds of pages. Horizon's file contained only 38. That immediately caught his attention. He compared it with another consulting company of similar size. 216 pages. Another. 193. Horizon, 38. Someone had approved an incomplete file. Kevin highlighted every missing document. Then he checked who approved the exception. Not Martin Doyle. A procurement manager named Eric Collins. Kevin searched Eric's employment history. 12 years with the company. Excellent performance reviews. No disciplinary actions. No anonymous complaints. Nothing unusual. Again, another dead end. Or another carefully planted one. His office door opened. Samuel Brooks entered carrying 2 storage boxes. Former FBI. Calm. Gray-haired. Methodical. Richard had mentioned him briefly. "You must be Kevin." Kevin stood. "Samuel." They shook hands. Samuel looked around the office. "I've heard you don't waste much time." "I try not to." Samuel smiled. "Good." He placed the boxes on the floor. "These are every procurement file my team collected during the last 6 months." Kevin looked at the labels. "Paper copies." "I don't trust digital evidence until I know who controls the servers." Kevin nodded with quiet approval. "You think like an investigator?" Samuel laughed softly. "And you think like an engineer?" Neither considered that a compliment. It was simply true. Samuel opened one box. "We've interviewed 23 employees." "What did they tell you?" "Nothing useful." "They lied." "No." Samuel shook his head. They genuinely believed everything was normal. Kevin understood. Good fraud rarely depended on convincing everyone. It depended on convincing enough people. He began reviewing the physical documents. Paper often revealed details people ignored when scanning PDFs. Staple holes, different printers, different signatures, ink colors. He noticed something unusual on the 4th contract. Every executive signature appeared in blue ink, except one, Richard Calloway's, black ink. Kevin compared another document. Blue, another, blue, then another carrying Richard's approval, black. Samuel noticed. "What is it?" Kevin pointed. "The signatures." Samuel leaned closer. "You think they're forged?" "I don't know." "They're different." Kevin looked again. "No, they're too different." Samuel frowned. "What do you mean? If someone wanted to forge Richard's signature, they'd imitate his pen." Kevin nodded. "They wouldn't choose a completely different ink." Samuel crossed his arms. So either Richard actually signed these, or someone wanted investigators to question them." Samuel smiled slightly. "I like the way you think." Kevin returned to the documents. Half an hour later, his phone vibrated. "Richard. Come upstairs." Kevin arrived minutes later. Richard stood beside a digital map displaying company facilities across North America. Without turning around, he asked one question. "What have you found?" Kevin answered carefully. I've found inconsistencies. Richard smiled. I expected that. I haven't found fraud. Richard finally turned. But I've found someone manipulating evidence. Richard remained silent. Kevin continued. The incomplete vendor file. The unusual signatures. The conflicting server records. They all point somewhere, but not in the same direction. Richard folded his hands. What does your instinct say? Kevin answered immediately. I don't trust instinct. Richard laughed. Fair enough. What does your experience say? Kevin thought for several seconds. Someone inside this company understands investigations. Richard's expression became serious. They're staying one step ahead. They're trying to, Kevin corrected himself. Richard walked slowly toward the conference table. My daughter wants legal action immediately. Against whom? Martin Doyle. Kevin shook his head. Too early. Richard waited. If Martin is guilty, he'll make another mistake. And if he isn't, the real person will believe the investigation succeeded. Richard looked pleased. You'd make a terrible politician. Kevin smiled faintly. I'll accept that. Richard slid a thin envelope across the table. I've delayed the board meeting. Why? I trust your judgment. Kevin looked surprised. That's risky. So is accusing the wrong executive. The billionaire sat. I'll give you 1 week. Kevin nodded. I'll use it. Back downstairs, Samuel waited beside the whiteboard. I've got something. Kevin joined him. Samuel pointed toward a printed spreadsheet. We traced every payment made to Horizon. Kevin studied the numbers. Monthly transfers, different amounts, always below the threshold requiring automatic board review. Interesting. They're keeping each payment small. Samuel nodded. Exactly. Kevin reached for a marker. He wrote every payment date beside the executive calendar already covering the board. Another pattern appeared. Every transfer occurred within 48 hours after Bradley Stone attended a private event with Calloway executives, country clubs, fundraisers, investment dinners, charity auctions. Samuel stared at the board. I missed that. You were looking at money. Samuel smiled. And you weren't. I was looking at timing. Kevin circled Bradley's name. For the first time, Bradley stood at the center of every visible connection. Still, visible connections were not evidence. Kevin refused to forget that. Late that afternoon, Victoria entered carrying several legal folders. My team finished reviewing the whistleblower complaints. Kevin looked up. Anything new? She placed the folders on the desk. No. Then she hesitated. Actually, Kevin waited. One employee disappeared. What do you mean? He resigned. When? 3 years ago. What department? Vendor compliance. Kevin immediately searched employee records. Name? Andrew Mercer. Kevin froze. The registered owner of Horizon Strategic Advisors carried exactly the same name. He looked at Victoria. Are you certain? She nodded. He worked here before forming Horizon. Samuel stepped closer. That can't be coincidence. Kevin opened Andrew Mercer's personnel file. Outstanding performance. No disciplinary history. Resigned voluntarily. Forwarding address unavailable. He searched payroll records. Nothing after resignation. Tax information. Minimal. Property ownership. None. Driver's license. Expired. It was as if Andrew Mercer had slowly disappeared after leaving the company. Samuel spoke quietly. We finally have someone. Kevin kept reading, then stopped. Emergency contact. One name. Bradley Stone. The room fell completely silent. Samuel looked from the screen to Kevin. Now we have motive. Kevin slowly closed the file. No? Samuel frowned. What? We have another connection. That's enough for probable cause. Not for certainty. Victoria looked frustrated. Kevin, every road leads back to Bradley. He nodded. I agree. Then why are you hesitating? Kevin walked toward the whiteboard. He studied every line, every name, every date, every connection. Then he erased one line linking Martin Doyle directly to Bradley. Samuel looked confused. Why erase it? Kevin answered without looking back. Because someone wanted us to draw that line? Neither Samuel nor Victoria spoke. Kevin continued. If I can see it this easily. The person who built this scheme wanted me to see it. He placed the marker down. The obvious answer is usually the first trap. The room became quiet. No one argued. Because every investigator in the room suddenly realized something uncomfortable. They had all been moving exactly where the evidence seemed to point. Only Kevin had stopped to ask who arranged the arrows in the first place. As evening settled over Chicago, his encrypted phone buzzed. An unknown number. No caller identification. Kevin answered. No one spoke. Only slow breathing. Then the line disconnected. A few seconds later, a single anonymous text message appeared. Stop looking at horizon. Look at the foundation instead. Kevin stared at the screen. For the first time since joining Calloway Dynamics, someone outside Richard's inner circle knew exactly what he was investigating. Kevin did not reply to the anonymous message. He took a screenshot, copied the metadata, saved the transmission log. Then he powered off the encrypted phone. The message itself mattered less than the route it had taken. Every communication left fingerprints, even the ones designed not to. He reopened the device 20 minutes later inside the secure forensic workstation Samuel Brooks had installed that morning. The message had traveled through 3 relay servers before reaching the encrypted network assigned exclusively to Richard Calloway's investigation team. Someone knew that number. Someone knew Kevin possessed it. That narrowed the field considerably. Samuel entered carrying 2 folders and noticed the frozen screen. Something happened. Kevin rotated the monitor. Samuel read the message twice. Stop looking at horizon. Look at the foundation instead. He looked toward Kevin. You think it's genuine? I don't know. You think it's a trap? I don't know that either. Samuel smiled faintly. You really hate guessing. I hate becoming attached to guesses. Samuel pulled up a chair. So where do we start? Kevin enlarged the metadata. The sender wanted me to read the words. He pointed toward the routing information. I want to read everything except the words. Samuel nodded. Within 30 minutes, they confirmed one important detail. The message had originated somewhere inside downtown Chicago. Not from another country. Not from an anonymous overseas relay. Someone local. Someone close. Kevin closed the report. Whoever sent this wasn't trying to disappear forever. Samuel looked confused. What makes you say that? They could have. Kevin tapped the screen. They chose not to. Meaning, they wanted me to know they're watching. Samuel leaned back. A warning. Or an invitation. Neither possibility made Kevin comfortable. He turned back to the whiteboard. One side listed every executive involved in procurement. Another listed outside vendors. A third listed anonymous complaints over the past 3 years. Only one phrase remained uncategorized. The foundation. Kevin circled the words. What foundation? Samuel answered first. Building foundation? Kevin shook his head. Too obvious. The Calloway Foundation. Samuel paused. Richard's charitable organization, created nearly 20 years earlier. It funded scholarships, hospitals, community technology centers, and veteran assistance programs throughout Illinois. Samuel frowned. You think the message refers to the charity? I think we should find out. Kevin searched internal records. The Calloway Foundation operated independently from the corporation. Separate accounting, separate board, separate legal entity. Still, administrative support came from Calloway Dynamics. Shared payroll, shared compliance, shared technology infrastructure. Interesting. He requested access. Authorization granted immediately. Richard's executive approval extended farther than Kevin had realized. Thousands of charitable records appeared. Scholarship grants, medical donations, university partnerships, construction funding. Kevin ignored the dollar amounts. Instead, he searched vendor names. Horizon Strategic Advisors, 7 results. Bradley Stone Development, 3 results. Andrew Mercer, 1 result. Kevin stopped scrolling. Andrew Mercer had signed a consulting agreement with the Calloway Foundation 2 years after leaving Calloway Dynamics. Samuel leaned closer. So he didn't disappear. No. He simply changed addresses. Kevin opened the contract. Consulting services, community redevelopment planning, technology outreach, annual compensation, $900,000. Samuel whistled quietly. That's generous. Kevin kept reading. Performance reports, missing. Deliverables, missing. Project evaluations, missing. Everything supporting the contract had vanished. Only payment records remained. Kevin looked at Samuel. Someone cleaned this file. Samuel nodded slowly. I agree. Kevin printed every remaining page. Paper forced people to slow down. He spread the documents across the conference table. Dates, approval signatures, bank transfers. One signature appeared repeatedly. Not Richard Calloway. Victoria Calloway. General Counsel. Samuel looked uneasy. That complicates things. It complicates assumptions, Kevin corrected him. Before they could continue, Evelyn Brooks knocked softly. Richard needs both of you. 5 minutes later, they entered the executive conference room. Richard stood beside Victoria. Neither looked relaxed. Richard motioned toward the table. Sit. Kevin immediately sensed something had changed. Victoria slid a folder across the polished wood. We received this 30 minutes ago. Inside was a resignation letter. Martin Doyle, effective immediately. Samuel looked stunned. He resigned. Victoria nodded. Without explanation. Richard folded his arms. He cleared his office before sunrise. Kevin read the letter carefully. Short, professional. No emotion, no accusation, no destination. Samuel broke the silence. He knows we're investigating. Richard looked toward Kevin. What do you think? Kevin placed the letter down. I think someone wanted this. Victoria frowned. You don't think Martin panicked? I don't know. Richard smiled slightly. You've infected everyone with that sentence. Kevin ignored the remark. If Martin were guilty, he tapped the resignation letter. Leaving removes his ability to influence records. Samuel nodded. True. If he's innocent, Kevin continued, he becomes the perfect suspect. The room fell quiet. Richard walked slowly towards the windows. I delayed accepting the resignation. Victoria looked surprised. You did? I wanted Kevin to see it first. Kevin appreciated the decision. When was this delivered? 7:42? Electronically? No, Victoria answered. Printed. Hand-delivered. Kevin looked up immediately. By whom? A courier. Security footage. We have it. Within minutes, they were reviewing lobby video. A man wearing a baseball cap entered, delivered an envelope, signed electronically, left. Average height, average build, nothing memorable. Too ordinary. Kevin replayed the footage. Again, then paused. Zoom in. Samuel enlarged the image. Not the courier. The reflection in the lobby glass. A black SUV parked across the street. The driver never exited, never looked toward the building, simply waited. Samuel narrowed his eyes. You think that's connected? I think someone rarely sends a courier without confirming delivery. Richard called security. Can we identify the vehicle? The director shook his head. License plate is invisible. Kevin pointed toward another camera angle. What about traffic cameras? The security director looked surprised. I hadn't considered that. Richard smiled. Now you have. The director hurried away. Kevin returned to the foundation records. One payment especially interested him, $850,000, approved by Victoria, transferred to Horizon Strategic Advisors, Purpose, Community Innovation Center. He searched construction records. No building, no permits, no photographs, no ribbon-cutting ceremony. Nothing. Victoria looked over his shoulder. I remember approving that. Kevin turned. You do? It was part of a larger package. She frowned. I never handled the project directly. Who did? She searched her memory. I don't remember. Kevin remained silent. People often apologized for imperfect memories. He never expected perfect memories. He expected records. Records rarely forgot. He requested archived email backups. Within seconds, hundreds of messages appeared. Most routine. Budget approvals, legal wording, meeting schedules. Then one subject line caught his attention. Community Innovation Center site, visit. Recipients. Victoria Calloway, Andrew Mercer, Bradley Stone, Martin Doyle, Richard Calloway. Kevin opened the message. Empty. No body text. Only a calendar invitation. He checked attendance. Richard declined. Victoria accepted. Martin accepted. Bradley accepted. Andrew accepted. Location. Lakeside redevelopment parcel. Kevin searched public land records. The parcel still sat vacant. Untouched. No construction had ever begun. Samuel looked puzzled. So they attended a site visit for a project that never existed. Kevin nodded. Exactly. Richard slowly turned away from the windows. For 3 years I've believed someone was stealing money. Kevin answered quietly. They may have been stealing something more valuable. What? Kevin looked again at the empty parcel. Legitimacy. The room became silent. Money could be hidden. Projects could be cancelled. Invoices could disappear. But a charitable foundation carried trust. If someone learned to move fraudulent transactions through respected charitable initiatives, almost no one would question them. Victoria closed the folder slowly. My signature. Kevin looked at her calmly. May have been used honestly. Or dishonestly. We don't know yet. Richard nodded. And we won't pretend otherwise. Just then, the security director hurried back into the conference room carrying a tablet. We found the SUV. He placed the image on the table. The vehicle had been captured 2 intersections away. The license plate was finally visible. Samuel immediately searched the registration database. The owner appeared in less than 5 seconds. The room grew completely still. The SUV was registered not to Bradley Stone, not to Martin Doyle, not to Andrew Mercer. It belonged to Penelope Perez. No one spoke for several seconds. The registration record remained on the conference room screen. Owner Penelope Perez. Address a luxury condominium overlooking Lakeshore Drive. Vehicle purchased 4 months earlier. Registration renewed only 3 weeks ago. Richard broke the silence first. Is she still living there? Kevin answered without taking his eyes off the screen. After the divorce, yes. Victoria glanced toward him carefully. You never checked where she moved? No? Why not? Kevin finally looked away from the monitor. Knowing her address wouldn't have changed what happened. No one argued. Samuel enlarged the traffic image. The driver isn't visible. Kevin nodded. Which means we know who owns the vehicle. But not who was inside. Samuel leaned back. So we don't assume. Kevin appreciated hearing the words from someone else. Exactly. Richard turned toward the security director. I want every available camera from the surrounding 4 blocks. We're already requesting city traffic footage. And don't contact the police yet. The director hesitated. Sir, we're still gathering facts. He left immediately. Victoria closed her laptop. If Penelope delivered Martin's resignation, Kevin interrupted gently. We don't know that. The SUV belonged to her. It doesn't prove she was driving. Victoria stopped herself. She knew he was right. Kevin picked up the registration report. One detail immediately caught his attention. Insurance policy. Primary driver. Penelope Perez. Secondary driver. Blank. Interesting. Most luxury insurance policies listed every household driver. This one listed only her. He wrote another note. Confirm vehicle usage. Never assume vehicle ownership equals driver identity. Richard noticed. You think someone borrowed it? I think possibilities are still open. Samuel smiled faintly. You've become predictable. Kevin looked up. In what way? You disappoint people who want quick answers. Richard laughed quietly. And that's exactly why you're here. Back in his office, Kevin requested the vehicle's automated toll records. Calloway Dynamics maintained agreements with several transportation analytics firms for executive security purposes. Within minutes, encrypted travel logs arrived. The black SUV had crossed 4 electronic toll points during the previous week. One route immediately stood out. Tuesday evening, downtown Chicago, North Shore, then back downtown before midnight. Samuel compared the timestamps. The resignation letter arrived Wednesday morning. Kevin nodded. Different day. So whoever used the SUV wasn't necessarily preparing that delivery. He overlaid another database. Hotel parking records, restaurant valet logs, private garage entries. One location appeared, the Drake Hotel. Again, the same hotel where Penelope Bradley Stone and Martin Doyle had attended the private dinner weeks earlier. Samuel folded his arms. That place keeps appearing. Kevin zoomed in. The SUV entered the underground garage, stayed 98 minutes, exited, no guest names, no surveillance available without a warrant. Still, another pattern. Never proof. Only another direction. His phone buzzed. Evelyn Brooks. Kevin, someone is here asking for you. Who? He wouldn't give his name. Where? Lobby. I'll come down. 5 minutes later, Kevin stepped into the nearly empty reception area. A man in his late 60s stood beside the windows. Simple jacket, work boots, weathered hands. Nothing about him suggested wealth or influence. The man removed his baseball cap. Kevin Perez. Yes. My name is Walter Jennings. Kevin waited. I worked maintenance here for 27 years. I remember seeing your employee file. Walter looked surprised. You've been reading old records. I've been reading many records. Walter nodded slowly. I figured. He handed Kevin a small, sealed envelope. No return address. No note. Just this. Who gave it to you? Walter glanced toward the revolving doors. A woman. When 10 minutes ago. What did she look like? Late 30s, dark sunglasses. Brown hair. She knew my name. Kevin asked one more question. Did she identify herself? Walter shook his head. Only said you'd understand? Kevin thanked him. Walter began walking away, then stopped. One more thing. Kevin waited. I've repaired enough buildings to know something. What? Damage is rarely where the crack first appears. Then he left. Kevin stood motionless for a moment. The envelope remained unopened. Back upstairs, Samuel examined it carefully. No fingerprints? No DNA? Professional. Kevin shrugged. Careful? Samuel slit the edge open. Inside rested only one object, A flash drive. No label. No markings. No note. Kevin connected it to an isolated forensic computer disconnected from every company network. Nothing happened immediately, then a single folder appeared. Foundation. Inside were scanned invoices, construction budgets, architectural renderings, environmental studies, everything related to the Community Innovation Center project. Samuel frowned. I thought those files were missing. So did I. Kevin opened the first invoice. Authentic. Second. Authentic. Third. Authentic. The fourth stopped him. The invoice number duplicated another payment already stored inside Calloway's accounting system. Same amount, different bank account. Samuel noticed it simultaneously. There. Kevin nodded. The money split. They continued reading. Every legitimate invoice possessed a matching duplicate. One payment reached the real contractor. The second traveled elsewhere. Not millions at once, hundreds of thousands, repeated quietly over several years. Kevin began calculating. 900,000, 850,000, 620,000, 480,000. The total climbed steadily, nearly $26 million. Samuel exhaled slowly. So there was fraud. Kevin corrected him. There appears to be. He enlarged the payment authorizations. Every duplicate transfer required 2 electronic approvals. One belonged to finance, the other belonged to legal. Victoria. Martin. Again. Samuel looked frustrated. This keeps pointing back to them. Kevin remained calm. Only on paper. What if paper tells the truth? Kevin answered without hesitation. Then we'll prove it. His encrypted phone rang. Richard. Conference room, immediately. When Kevin entered, Richard stood beside Victoria and Evelyn. Their expressions were tense. Richard didn't waste time. Our IT department found an unauthorized login. When? 30 minutes ago. From where? Our archive servers. Kevin looked toward the screen. What was accessed? Richard answered quietly. The exact foundation files you're reviewing. Samuel frowned. Someone knows we have them. Victoria added another detail. The login used your credentials. Kevin remained perfectly still. My credentials, Richard nodded. According to the system. Samuel immediately spoke. Impossible. Kevin looked at the access log. Username, Kevin Perez. Successful authentication. Archive download, timestamp, 23 minutes earlier. He checked his own workstation. He had been inside the forensic lab with Samuel during the entire period. 3 witnesses could confirm it. Richard folded his arms. What does that tell you? Kevin answered calmly. My account was cloned. Victoria looked alarmed. Can someone do that? Kevin nodded. If they understand the authentication system. Samuel leaned over the keyboard. The clone originated from inside headquarters. Kevin followed the digital path. Floor 22, executive offices. Not the basement, not the server room. Someone had deliberately entered the executive network, using Kevin's identity, downloading the exact files he had just received. Richard looked around the room. They're reacting. Kevin nodded. They're nervous. No. Kevin corrected himself after another moment. They're informed. Richard understood immediately. You think someone inside this building knows every move we make? Kevin looked toward the glass walls surrounding the conference room. Someone was watching the investigation almost as closely as the investigators themselves. The anonymous text, the flash drive, the cloned credentials. None of it was random. Someone wanted Kevin to find the truth. Someone else wanted to stay one step ahead of him. The only certainty left was that the real game had never been about hiding evidence. It had always been about controlling who discovered it first. As Kevin stared across the executive floor, his eyes stopped on a maintenance worker, replacing a ceiling light outside the conference room. The man wore a standard contractor uniform. Nothing unusual, except for one detail. When he climbed down the ladder, he looked directly at Kevin, raised 2 fingers briefly towards the ceiling, then walked away without saying a single word. Kevin stepped into the hallway. He looked up. A newly installed security camera pointed directly at the conference room door. He checked the installation tag. It had been added only 3 days earlier. No one on Richard's executive team had authorized it. Kevin did not touch the unauthorized camera. He photographed it from 6 angles, recorded the installation tag, measured its position, then asked the security director to seal the hallway. No one entered. No one left. The maintenance contractor who had warned him was already gone. His name did not appear on the building's visitor list. Neither did the company printed across his uniform. Samuel Brooks stood beneath the camera and followed its angle toward the conference room. It couldn't record inside through the glass. It didn't need to, Kevin said. What was it watching? The door? Samuel understood. Entry times, exit times, who attended each meeting, how long they stayed. Simple information, useful information. Someone had not been listening to conversations. Someone had been mapping behavior. Kevin returned to the forensic office and requested the camera's wireless connection history. The device had transmitted encrypted files every 13 minutes, always to the same receiver. A private network registered inside a commercial office building 3 blocks away. Samuel checked the address. Stone Urban Development. Kevin stared at the result. Bradley's company. Finally, a direct technical connection. Not a photograph, not a shared dinner, not a suspicious contract. A surveillance device inside Calloway Dynamics had transmitted data to Bradley Stone's office. Samuel reached for his phone. That is enough to contact federal investigators. Kevin stopped him. Not yet. Samuel lowered the phone slowly. We have unauthorized surveillance, cloned credentials, duplicated invoices, shell companies, and $26 million in questionable transfers. We have enough to begin. Then why wait? Kevin looked toward the sealed evidence drive. Because whoever installed that camera may already be destroying everything connected to it. Samuel's expression changed. You want them to keep moving? I want them to believe we haven't found the receiver. Kevin called Richard. The billionaire answered immediately. Tell security the camera is defective equipment installed by mistake. Richard paused. That's not true. It needs to sound true. You want the person responsible to remain comfortable. For a few more hours. Richard understood. I'll handle it. Kevin then turned to Victoria. We need outside counsel. She stood beside the conference table, arms folded tightly. My legal department can manage this. No. The answer came calmly. Without insult, without hesitation. Victoria looked at him. Why? Your electronic signature appears on several transfers. Her jaw tightened. You believe I'm involved? I believe a defense attorney would argue that you controlled the investigation into documents carrying your own name. The room became silent. Kevin continued. The evidence must survive questions we haven't heard yet. Victoria held his gaze, then nodded. I'll contact Harrison Cole and Mercer. Not Mercer, Samuel said. Everyone turned toward him. Samuel opened a corporate registry report. One of the law firm's senior partners was related to Andrew Mercer through marriage. A distant connection. Still a connection. Victoria selected another firm, Whitmore and Hale, a Chicago litigation practice known for federal compliance cases. By noon, 2 outside attorneys arrived. Margaret Whitmore, 58, precise, unimpressed by wealth. Beside her came Daniel Hale, a former federal prosecutor who spoke only after reading every page placed before him. Kevin presented the evidence in chronological order. No theories, no accusations, only records. The missing foundation documents, the duplicate invoices, the shell company, the camera transmission, the cloned credentials, the resignation letter, Penelope's SUV, Bradley's office network. When Kevin finished, Margaret closed the final folder. "You've preserved chain of custody," Samuel answered, "from the moment each item was discovered. Original files. Isolated and hashed. Access logs. Complete. Any unauthorized searches?" Kevin shook his head. Everything came through Richard Calloway's written authorization. Margaret looked toward Richard. "You understand what happens next?" Richard sat at the far end of the table. "We involve the government." "Correct. And once we do, you lose control." Richard glanced at Kevin. "That may be the point." At 2:15 p.m., Margaret contacted the United States Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois. No press release, no visible agents, no dramatic raid. Only a private meeting scheduled inside a secure federal building on South Dearborn Street. Kevin carried one notebook. Samuel carried the encrypted evidence drive. Victoria carried nothing. Her name appeared on too many documents already. The federal conference room contained 4 people: Assistant United States Attorney Rebecca Sloan, 2 FBI financial crimes agents, 1 forensic accountant from the Internal Revenue Service. Rebecca listened without interruption. When Kevin finished, she asked a single question. "Why didn't Calloway Dynamics report this sooner?" Richard answered. "Because we did not know whether we had discovered fraud or manufactured evidence." Rebecca looked toward Kevin. "And now," Kevin replied carefully, "now we know both exist." The prosecutor leaned back. "Explain." "The money movement appears real." He placed the duplicate invoices on the table. But several records were altered to direct investigators toward specific executives. "Which executives?" "Martin Doyle and Victoria Calloway." Victoria did not move. Rebecca studied her. "You approved some of these transactions." Victoria answered evenly. "I approved bundled foundation budgets. I did not authorize duplicate transfers." "You may need to provide sworn testimony." "I will." Rebecca turned to Samuel. "And Martin Doyle?" "His location is currently unknown." The FBI agents exchanged a glance. One of them spoke. "We found him this morning." Everyone looked up. "Where?" "O'Hare International Airport." "Was he leaving the country?" "No." The agent opened a folder. "He purchased a one-way ticket to Denver but never boarded." Kevin asked, "Where is he now?" "In protective custody." Richard's expression hardened. "Why protective custody?" Rebecca answered. "Because Mr. Doyle contacted us 2 days ago." The words changed everything. Martin had approached federal authorities before resigning, before the courier delivered the letter, before Kevin discovered the camera. Rebecca continued. "He claimed someone had been using his credentials for nearly 3 years." Kevin remained still. That matched the conflicting access logs. "Did he name anyone?" "No." "Why not?" "He said he had suspicions but no proof." Samuel leaned forward. "What did he provide?" The FBI agent placed a small encrypted drive on the table. "Copies of internal transaction records." Kevin immediately recognized the file labels: foundation payments, horizon transfers, Bradley Stone meeting schedules. Martin had collected nearly the same evidence. But one folder was different. Personal authorizations. Inside were signed instructions from Penelope Perez. Kevin saw her name before anyone spoke. His chest tightened. He forced himself to look at the document, not the memory attached to it. Penelope had signed as an independent project liaison for Stone Urban Development. The position had paid her $12,000 per month. The first payment arrived 5 months earlier, before Kevin lost his job, before she asked for a divorce, before she claimed Bradley was simply someone who understood ambition. Rebecca watched Kevin carefully. "Did you know she worked for Stone?" "No." Did she have access to your home computer? Yes. Passwords? Some. Corporate systems? Never. Rebecca slid another page forward. Martin believes your former employer, Lakeshore Integrated Systems, may have been used as an outside access point. Kevin stared at the company name. His layoff no longer looked separate. The restructuring, the timing, his removal, Bradley's sudden confidence, Penelope's hidden payments, all of it now sat within the same widening circle. Rebecca continued. We need sworn statements from each of you today. For the next 6 hours, the story was divided into testimony. Richard described his concerns. Victoria explained every authorization. Samuel documented every investigative step. Kevin answered questions about systems dates, access, and evidence he never guessed. When he did not know, he said so. When a conclusion exceeded the records, he refused to make it. By evening, Rebecca signed the first applications for federal search warrants. Stone Urban Development, Horizon Strategic Advisors, the Calloway Foundation Archive Room, 3 private residences, 1 listed under Andrew Mercer, 1 under Bradley Stone. The last address remained sealed from everyone except the agents. Kevin left the federal building shortly after 10. Cold wind moved between the towers. His phone rang before he reached the curb. Unknown number. He answered. No breathing this time. No silence. Penelope's voice came through clearly. Kevin, I need you to listen. He stopped beneath a streetlight. Where are you? I can't tell you. Are you safe? A pause. For now. Kevin closed his eyes briefly. What happened? Her voice dropped. Bradley knows about the warrants. They had not been executed yet. Only 5 people outside the federal team knew they existed. Kevin's grip tightened around the phone. How? I don't know. Then he heard a car door close somewhere near her. Penelope inhaled sharply. Kevin, the man named Andrew Mercer isn't who you think he is. The line went dead. At that exact moment, 3 blocks away, the first federal convoy turned onto Michigan Avenue. The warrants were no longer secret, and someone had begun moving before the agents arrived. Kevin watched the federal vehicles disappear into the traffic. Penelope's final sentence remained sharper than the cold air around him. Andrew Mercer isn't who you think he is. The statement offered no proof, only another direction. Kevin called Rebecca Sloan immediately. She answered on the second ring. Penelope contacted me. Where is she? I don't know. What did she say? Kevin repeated every word exactly. No interpretation. No missing pauses. Rebecca listened. Do not contact her again. She called me. Then do not answer if she calls back. Kevin looked down South Dearborn Street. She said Bradley knows about the warrants. That information is restricted. Apparently not restricted enough. Rebecca's voice hardened. We are moving now. The call ended. Kevin remained beneath the streetlight for another moment. Then he returned to the federal building. Inside, the atmosphere had changed. Agents moved quickly through the hallways. Phones rang behind closed doors. Printed warrants disappeared into sealed folders. Samuel met Kevin near the elevators. They found the leak. Who not yet? Samuel handed him a tablet. A federal access log showed that 1 warrant draft had been opened 17 minutes before Penelope called. The account belonged to a junior legal clerk. The clerk had not been inside the building. His credentials had been copied. Again, another identity used remotely. Another false trail. Kevin studied the timestamp. Where did the login originate? Public wireless network. Location. Samuel enlarged the map. The Drake Hotel. Kevin closed his eyes briefly. The hotel had become a recurring doorway into the entire scheme. Private dinners, foundation meetings, vehicle records, now a stolen federal login. We need the hotel's network logs, he said. Agents are getting them. At 10:42 p.m., the first search team entered Stone Urban Development. The office occupied 3 floors of a renovated tower near Michigan Avenue. The reception area was empty. Computers remained on. Coffee sat inside one conference room still warm. Bradley's employees had left in a hurry. Agents secured laptops, accounting files, security recordings, and 2 locked cabinets containing foundation contracts. Bradley Stone was not there. His personal phone had been turned off 19 minutes before the agents arrived. At Horizon Strategic Advisors, the second team found something stranger. There was no real office, only a mailbox, a rented conference room, and a storage unit filled with old printers' disposable phones, forged corporate seals, and hundreds of signed documents. Andrew Mercer was nowhere inside. At Bradley's residence, agents found packed luggage, cash, 3 passports, 2 under different names. The black SUV was missing. Penelope's condominium was empty. No clothes in the closet, no toiletries, no suitcase. Only one object remained on the kitchen counter: a sealed envelope with Kevin's name written across the front. Rebecca did not allow Kevin to open it. An evidence technician photographed the envelope, checked it for fingerprints, and placed it inside a transparent sleeve. Then Rebecca opened it while 3 witnesses watched. Inside was a handwritten letter. Kevin recognized Penelope's writing immediately. "Kevin, I know you have no reason to trust me. I did not understand what Bradley was doing until it was too late. He told me Andrew Mercer was a former Calloway employee who managed private investments. That was not true. Andrew Mercer is not one man. It is a name they use. Different people sign it. Different people appear at meetings. The man I met as Andrew was older. The man Bradley spoke to on the phone sounded younger. Bradley made me sign foundation documents. He said they were for redevelopment consulting. I believed him because I wanted to believe the life he promised me was real. I used your old home computer once to open a file he sent me. He said it was a property report. I think that is how they entered Lakeshore's network. I am sorry. There is a safe deposit box at First American Bank on Wabash, box 417. My key is taped beneath the bottom drawer of the bedroom dresser. Inside is everything Bradley told me to destroy. Kevin read the letter twice. No anger rose inside him, only a cold understanding. Penelope had not simply left their marriage for another man. She had carried a door into Kevin's former company without knowing what stood behind it. Rebecca placed the letter into evidence. We need the key. The bedroom dresser remained inside Kevin's house. Agents accompanied him to Evanston. The neighborhood looked peaceful when 3 unmarked federal vehicles stopped outside. Mrs. Henderson watched from behind her curtains. Kevin unlocked the front door. Nothing appeared disturbed. The house still carried the emptiness Penelope had left behind. He led the agents upstairs. The dresser remained against the bedroom wall. One agent removed the bottom drawer. A small brass key was taped underneath. Number 417 had been engraved into its head. Rebecca photographed it, then sealed it. They reached First American Bank shortly after midnight. The branch manager arrived wearing a coat over his pajamas. 2 attorneys reviewed the warrant. The vault opened. Box 417 was longer than Kevin expected. Inside were 3 flash drives, a disposable phone, a stack of notarized documents, and a black notebook. Samuel opened the notebook carefully. Every page contained dates, dollar amounts, initials, and hotel room numbers. Penelope's handwriting appeared only on the first page. Bradley said this protects us. The remaining entries belonged to someone else. Kevin recognized the precision. Straight columns, consistent spacing, transaction references. This was not Bradley's work. It resembled accounting. Samuel reached the final page. A list of scheduled payments appeared. Martin Doyle, Victoria Calloway, Richard Calloway, Kevin Perez. Each name had an amount beside it, not money paid to them. Money assigned to transactions using their identities. Kevin's name carried the largest number, $48 million. Rebecca looked toward him. You were going to become the next authorization source. Kevin understood immediately. His new position at Calloway Dynamics had not created the danger. It had accelerated an existing plan. Someone had known Richard would eventually bring him into the company, or had manipulated events to make that happen. His layoff, his marriage collapsing. Richard's call. The timing had appeared accidental. Now it looked engineered. Samuel powered on the disposable phone inside a shielded evidence container. One saved message appeared. No sender name, only a number. Tomorrow. Calloway boardroom. Make Perez present the evidence. Once he authenticates the files, the transfer becomes clean. Kevin stared at the screen. The person behind the scheme did not want to stop the investigation. They wanted Kevin to complete it. His reputation, his access, his technical credibility. All of it would transform manipulated records into trusted evidence. Richard had chosen Kevin because his judgment could not be purchased. Someone else had planned to use that same integrity as a weapon. Rebecca ordered the board meeting canceled. Kevin stopped her. No. Everyone turned toward him. Samuel frowned. You want to proceed? Yes. It could be a trap. It is a trap. Kevin looked at the notebook. But now we know what they expect. Rebecca studied him. And what do you expect? Kevin closed the safe deposit box. That whoever built this system will be watching the boardroom. At 8:55 the next morning, every Calloway director took a seat. Richard sat at the head of the table. Victoria remained beside outside counsel. Federal agents waited behind mirrored glass in an adjoining room. Kevin entered last. He carried no flash drive, no folders, only his old leather notebook. Bradley's chair remained empty. Martin's chair remained empty. One director glanced at the clock. Are we beginning? Richard looked toward Kevin. Kevin placed the notebook on the table. Yes. The presentation screen came alive. A remote participant had connected without authorization. No name appeared, only a black square. Kevin watched the connection indicator turn green. Someone had accepted the invitation. Someone believed the plan was still working. Then a voice came through the speakers. Calm, older, familiar. Good morning, Kevin. Kevin froze. He had heard that voice before, 8 years earlier, during the cyberattack that first connected him to Richard Calloway. Kevin did not answer immediately. The voice from the speakers carried the same deliberate calm he remembered from 8 years earlier. Back then, it had guided the cyberattack through several layers of false traffic. Now it entered the boardroom as if it belonged there. Richard Calloway leaned forward. Who are you? The black square remained unchanged. The voice ignored him. Kevin, you always were the careful one. Kevin looked at the connection details displayed on the lower corner of the screen. No visible address. No ordinary conference identification. The participant had entered through a hidden administrative channel. Kevin placed one hand beside his notebook. You knew I would recognize your voice. I hoped you would. Why? A quiet laugh came through the speakers. Because recognition creates trust. Kevin's expression did not change. Not this time. Behind the mirrored glass, federal technicians traced the signal through layers of encrypted networks. No one inside the boardroom looked toward them. The directors had been instructed to behave naturally. Several failed. One adjusted his tie repeatedly. Another stared at the table. Victoria remained perfectly still. The voice continued. Present the foundation evidence, Kevin. Why? Because the board deserves the truth. Kevin looked toward Richard, then toward the presentation screen. What truth that millions were stolen? We already know that Martin Doyle and Victoria Calloway authorized the payments. Victoria's jaw tightened. Kevin remained calm. You want me to authenticate the records. I want you to explain them. Those are different things. A pause followed. The unseen participant had expected cooperation. Kevin opened his notebook. 8 years ago, you used a vendor update channel to enter Calloway Dynamics. No answer. You hid the intrusion behind legitimate traffic. Still silence. You expected the system to trust the source because the source had been trusted before. The voice finally returned. You remember well. You are doing the same thing now. Richard looked toward Kevin. Kevin continued. You created real transactions, real invoices, real meetings. Then you placed false evidence beside them. The black square remained silent. You did not need every record to be false. Kevin's voice stayed even. You only needed enough truth around the false records to make them look legitimate. One director shifted uncomfortably. Kevin noticed. He noticed everything. The remote participant spoke again, and yet money disappeared. Yes. People signed documents, yes. Your wife worked for Bradley Stone. Kevin paused only briefly. Yes. So the evidence is clear. No. Kevin closed the notebook. The evidence is convenient. The voice hardened. Present the files. Kevin looked directly at the black square. I will present one. The main screen changed. A single transaction appeared. $48 million. Authorization source, Kevin Perez. The payment had not yet occurred. It was scheduled for later that afternoon. Several directors reacted at once. Richard stared at the screen. Victoria turned toward Kevin. He raised one hand. This transaction was created 6 months ago. Richard frowned. That was before you joined the company. Exactly. The boardroom became silent. Kevin enlarged the metadata. The transaction had been designed to use credentials that did not yet exist. His future employee identification number appeared inside the payment structure, his future access level, his future authentication certificate. Someone had prepared his role before Richard ever called him. The remote voice said nothing. Kevin continued. My layoff was not random. He displayed another record. A payment from Horizon Strategic Advisors to a consulting company linked to Lakeshore Integrated Systems. The payment had arrived 3 weeks before the layoffs. The consulting recommendation specifically identified Kevin's department as overstaffed. His position had been marked for elimination. Thomas Reynolds had signed the restructuring documents without knowing who had funded the analysis. Kevin placed another file on the screen. A background report about Richard Calloway. It included Richard's known history with Kevin, the refusal of the 7-figure reward, the private business card, the possibility that Richard would contact Kevin if he ever needed someone he trusted. The entire board stared at the screen. Richard's voice dropped. They predicted my decision. Kevin nodded. They designed the circumstances around it. The remote participant disconnected. The black square vanished. At the same moment, federal technicians completed the trace. Rebecca Sloan entered through the side door. We have the location. Richard stood, where Rebecca looked toward Kevin, the North Shore estate. Richard froze. His own property. The estate where he had first offered Kevin a reward 8 years earlier. Federal agents were already moving. 27 minutes later, they entered the estate's private security building. Inside, they found servers, recording equipment, corporate files, and Andrew Mercer. His real name was Charles Vance, 67, former head of cybersecurity at Calloway Dynamics. He had left the company 11 years earlier after Richard refused to approve an internal surveillance program. Vance had spent years constructing shell companies, false identities, and hidden access routes through former employees. Bradley Stone had not designed the scheme. He had sold introductions, moved money, recruited people impressed by status. Penelope had been one of them. By noon, Bradley was arrested at a private airfield outside Chicago. Andrew Mercer's younger identity was discovered to be Bradley's financial assistant. The older Andrew was Charles Vance. The name had never belonged to a real person. Martin Doyle was cleared of directing the fraud, though investigators continued reviewing his failure to report unusual transactions sooner. Victoria's signatures were authenticated as genuine approvals for legitimate project budgets. The duplicate transfers had been inserted afterward. Penelope surrendered that afternoon. She arrived at the federal building with an attorney. No designer coat, no expensive jewelry, no Bradley, only a plain gray dress and a frightened expression. Kevin watched from the far end of a hallway as agents escorted her into an interview room. She saw him, stopped, then lowered her eyes. He did not approach. The evidence had reached the point where personal conversations could wait. 3 weeks later, federal prosecutors announced charges against Charles Vance Bradley Stone and 6 additional participants: conspiracy, wire fraud, identity theft, obstruction, illegal surveillance. Financial institutions froze millions in connected accounts. Investors abandoned Bradley's projects. Banks called his loans. His name disappeared from charity boards and development panels almost overnight. The magazine covers remained. They simply became evidence of how convincing appearances could be. Calloway Dynamics released a brief statement. No dramatic claims, no public celebration. Only confirmation that the company had cooperated fully and begun an independent ethics review. Reporters waited outside headquarters for Kevin. He used another entrance. Richard offered him a permanent executive position: Chief Integrity and Systems Officer. Kevin accepted only after changing the title: Director of Systems Integrity. He did not want authority to sound larger than the work. One quiet Tuesday morning, Penelope sent him a message through their attorneys. She requested 15 minutes. No discussion about property, no legal negotiations, only a conversation. Kevin agreed to meet at a small cafe in Evanston, the same cafe where they had once spent Saturday mornings planning vacations they rarely took. Penelope arrived first. She sat near the window with both hands around a cup of coffee she had not touched. Kevin took the chair opposite her. For several seconds, neither spoke. Penelope looked older, not because of time, because certainty had left her face. "Thank you for coming," she said. Kevin nodded. "You have 15 minutes. She accepted the boundary. "I didn't know what Bradley was doing. I believe you didn't know everything." The distinction hurt. Her eyes lowered. "I knew some things didn't make sense." Kevin remained silent. "He paid me too much. I signed documents I didn't understand. I used your computer after you told me not to open unknown files." She swallowed. "I kept telling myself successful people handled business differently." Kevin watched the street beyond the window. People crossed, carrying groceries and coffee. Ordinary lives, ordinary choices, Penelope continued. "When you lost your job, I thought it proved I had been right about you." Kevin looked back at her. "Right about what?" "That you were too cautious, too quiet, that you didn't want enough." Her voice trembled, but Bradley wanted everything. Kevin said nothing, and he destroyed everything he touched. The cafe remained quiet around them. Penelope reached into her purse but removed nothing. "I'm sorry." Kevin's expression did not change. "For leaving, for lying, for judging you, for using your patience as evidence that you were weak." She looked directly at him. "And for realizing your value only after someone else recognized it." Kevin allowed the words to settle. There had been a time when he would have wanted that apology, a time when hearing it might have changed something. That time had passed quietly, without announcement. Penelope wiped one tear from her cheek. "Is there any chance we could begin again?" Kevin looked at the woman he had once expected to grow old beside. He did not hate her. That surprised him. He simply no longer belonged to the future she was asking for. "Trust doesn't disappear in one day," he said. Penelope waited. "And it doesn't return in one day." Then maybe with time, no. The word was calm, not cruel. Final. Penelope lowered her eyes. Kevin stood and placed enough money beside his untouched coffee to cover both drinks. I hope you tell the truth. To the prosecutors. To yourself. He walked toward the door. Outside, Richard waited beside an ordinary black sedan. No driver standing at attention. No display. Just an old man leaning against the car with 2 cups of coffee. How did it go? Richard asked. Kevin accepted 1 cup. It ended. Richard nodded. Those are sometimes the best meetings. Kevin looked back once through the cafe window. Penelope remained at the table, alone. Then he turned toward the street. Not every victory required applause. Some arrived as the quiet ability to leave the past exactly where it belonged. 3 months after the arrests, Calloway Dynamics no longer looked like a company recovering from a scandal. It looked like a company learning how the scandal had become possible. That distinction mattered to Kevin. Punishment was visible. Prevention was quieter. Arrests made headlines. Better systems rarely did. Kevin arrived at headquarters before 7 each morning. He still drove the same aging Camry. Still carried the same worn leather briefcase. Still ordered ordinary coffee from the small shop across the street. The only visible difference was the security badge clipped to his jacket. Director of Systems Integrity. The title gave him access to every operating division in the company. It did not give him permission to stop asking questions. Richard had made that clear on Kevin's first official day. You report directly to me, Richard had said. Kevin had disagreed. No. Richard stared at him from behind the desk. Most people did not refuse reporting access to a billionaire. Kevin continued. If this office exists only because you trust me, it will disappear when you leave. Richard slowly leaned back. What do you suggest I report to an independent board committee, with authority to investigate executives, with authority to investigate anyone? Richard smiled. Including me, especially you. The smile widened, approved. That became the first reform. The Systems Integrity Office did not belong to the Chief Executive Finance Department, Legal Department, or Board Chairman. It answered to an independent committee containing outside directors, ethics specialists, and 1 rotating employee representative. No single executive could close an investigation. No single executive could alter evidence. No single signature could move large payments. Kevin's second reform created immediate resistance. He eliminated bundled approvals. For years, executives had signed packages containing dozens of transactions. Most were legitimate. A few had hidden inside the volume. That was how Victoria's real authorization had been reused around duplicate transfers. Under the new system, every high-risk transaction required a clear description, a verified recipient, and independent confirmation from 2 departments with no shared management chain. Several executives complained. This will slow us down, one division president told Kevin during a meeting. Kevin looked at the projected workflow. By 11 minutes. 11 minutes across thousands of payments becomes expensive. So does losing $26 million. The executive crossed his arms. We cannot design the entire company around 1 criminal scheme. Kevin remained calm. We are not. He advanced the slide. We are designing it around human behavior. The room became quiet. People made mistakes. People trusted familiar names. People skipped pages when documents became long. People approved routine transactions because everyone before them had approved similar ones. Charles Vance had not defeated Calloway Dynamics by building a perfect technical attack. He had studied ordinary habits. Then he had turned those habits into access. Kevin redesigned the systems accordingly. Payment software displayed unusual changes rather than hiding them inside dense reports. Credentials expired faster. Administrative access required physical verification. Security alerts went to more than 1 department. Vendor ownership records were checked against employees' relatives, former employees, and known contractors. Every deleted file left a permanent record. Every executive account had a separate emergency lock controlled by the independent committee. The reforms were not dramatic. They were difficult to abuse. Kevin preferred that. Victoria became his closest ally. Their early suspicion had changed into professional respect. She reviewed every policy for legal weakness. Kevin reviewed every legal process for technical weakness. They disagreed often. Neither took disagreement personally. One afternoon, Victoria entered his office carrying a 40-page draft, the whistleblower policy. Kevin looked at the document. 40 pages. It covers every legal requirement. No employee will read 40 pages. They don't need to memorize it. They need to trust it. Victoria placed the draft on his desk. What do you propose one page? That is impossible. Kevin removed the first page and began crossing out paragraphs. Employees need to know 4 things. He wrote them down. How to report. Who receives the report. How their identity is protected. What happens next? Victoria watched him reduce complex legal language to direct sentences. You're removing important protections. No. Kevin pointed toward the remaining document. The protections stay in the policy. The instructions stay simple. By evening, they had produced 2 versions, a complete legal standard and a 1-page reporting guide posted in every office, warehouse, laboratory, and employee portal. Reports increased within a month. Most involved minor issues: expense manipulation, supervisor retaliation, unsafe shortcuts. One concerned a senior executive using company transportation for private vacations. No report approached the scale of Vance's scheme. Kevin treated each one seriously. Small violations taught people whether the system worked. If employees saw minor wrongdoing ignored, they would never report something larger. Kevin created a rule. Every whistleblower received confirmation within 24 hours. Every report received a documented review. Every closed case included a reason. No complaint disappeared into silence. Samuel Brooks agreed to remain with the company as head of corporate investigations. He accepted on one condition: no executive titles. Kevin nodded. What title do you want, investigator? That's all. That's the work. Kevin understood. Samuel built a small team of former auditors, cybersecurity specialists, compliance officers, and field investigators. Their office was not placed on the executive floor. It sat beside the employee training center. Accessible, visible, ordinary. Richard watched these changes with quiet satisfaction. He attended fewer meetings, delegated more decisions, spent longer periods at the North Shore estate. The same property where federal agents had discovered Charles Vance's hidden servers now became a place Richard rarely visited alone. Something about the betrayal had aged him. Not visibly at first, then all at once. One evening, Kevin found Richard in the boardroom after everyone else had left. The city lights reflected across the glass walls. Lake Michigan had disappeared into the darkness. Richard sat in the chairman's chair without reading the documents before him. Kevin entered quietly. You missed the Foundation Committee meeting. I know, that's unusual. Richard looked toward the empty seats. I built this company when I was 31. Kevin waited. I believed that if I chose intelligent people, paid them well, and treated them fairly, the company would remain honest. That wasn't wrong. It wasn't enough. No. Richard accepted the answer. Most people would have comforted him. Kevin did not offer comfort that required dishonesty. Richard looked toward the skyline. Vance worked beside me for 9 years. He knew how you thought. He knew how everyone thought. That was his advantage. Richard nodded, and you took it away. Kevin shook his head. I changed some systems. You changed who the systems protect. That was closer to the truth. Previously, Calloway's controls had been designed to protect executives from external threats. Now they protected the company from unchecked authority, even when that authority came from inside. Richard pushed a folder across the table. Retirement documents? Kevin looked at the first page. When end of the quarter? Does Victoria know? Not yet. She should hear it from you. She will. Richard folded his hands. The board wants me to name a successor. Kevin already knew where the conversation was heading. No. Richard smiled. I haven't asked the question. You don't need to. You could lead this company. I could. The confidence in Kevin's answer surprised neither of them. Richard raised an eyebrow. Then why refuse? Because being capable of holding power does not mean power is the right work. You think leadership is power? Bad leadership is. Richard studied him. What is good leadership? Kevin looked around the boardroom. Building systems that still work when the leader is wrong. Richard remained silent for several seconds. Then he laughed softly. You really are a terrible candidate for chief executive. I know, that may make you the best one. Kevin closed the retirement folder. Victoria understands the company. She understands the law. She understands the people. She also challenges you. Richard nodded. Frequently. That is useful. You believe she should succeed me. I believe the board should evaluate her without treating your last name as either a qualification or a disqualification. Richard smiled again. Fair. The board began the succession process the following week. Victoria did not receive automatic approval. She presented a 5-year operating plan, answered questions from independent directors, disclosed every decision connected to the Foundation investigation, accepted responsibility for approvals she had signed without sufficient review, even though the duplicate transfers had been added later. That honesty mattered. 6 weeks later, the board named her chief executive. Her first action was not a celebration. She established a permanent employee ethics council. Her second was to expand Kevin's integrity program across every Calloway subsidiary. Her third was to remove the private elevator reserved for senior executives. A symbolic decision. Kevin usually disliked symbols. This one had practical value. Executives now entered through the same security checkpoints as everyone else, the same rules, the same access logs, the same visible accountability. Not everyone welcomed the new culture. 2 senior leaders resigned. One claimed the controls showed a lack of trust. Kevin did not try to persuade him to stay. Trust was not the absence of verification. Trust was what remained after verification became normal. At the end of the quarter, employees gathered inside the company auditorium for Richard's final address. He stood alone at the center of the stage. No dramatic video, no orchestra, no long introduction. He spoke for 9 minutes and he thanked the employees, admitted the company had confused reputation with integrity, explained that strength did not come from pretending failure had never occurred. It came from examining failure without protecting anyone from the truth. Then he called Victoria to the stage. Applause filled the room. Kevin remained near the back wall beside Samuel. Richard noticed him. Kevin Perez, he said into the microphone. Hundreds of people turned. Kevin did not move. Richard smiled. He will dislike what I am about to say. A few people laughed. This company survived a crisis because one man refused to accept the easiest answer. Kevin lowered his gaze slightly. He did not save us by speaking louder. He saved us by looking longer. The applause began again. Kevin accepted it without enjoying it. Then Richard added one final sentence. The future of Calloway Dynamics will not depend on finding another Kevin Perez. The room quieted. It will depend on building a company where every honest employee can do what he did. That was the first public praise Kevin believed served a useful purpose, not because it elevated him, because it removed him from the center of the solution. After the ceremony, Richard left through the main entrance. No private elevator, no executive corridor. Employees lined the lobby to shake his hand. Kevin waited outside beside the black sedan. Richard approached slowly. You could have warned me about that speech, Kevin said. You would have stopped me. Yes, That is why I didn't. Richard opened the passenger door, but did not enter. What will you do now? Work tomorrow. Richard laughed. I mean, after all this. Kevin looked up at the tower. Lights remained on across dozens of floors, people reviewing reports, building systems, questioning decisions. I'll make sure the next person doesn't need a billionaire's phone call before anyone recognizes his value. Richard's expression softened. That sounds difficult. Kevin opened the car door for him. It is. Richard entered the sedan. Before the door closed, he looked toward Kevin one final time. Good. The vehicle pulled into the evening traffic. Kevin remained on the sidewalk. He had once believed justice would feel like a verdict, an arrest, a confession, a final piece of evidence placed on a table. Now he understood it differently. Justice was not only what happened to people who broke a system. It was what happened to the system afterward. For the first time in years, Calloway Dynamics was becoming stronger without pretending it had never been weak. 6 months later, Kevin Perez woke before sunrise without an alarm. The habit had survived the divorce, the investigation, the arrests, the promotion. But the reason had changed. He no longer woke early because his mind was searching for danger. He woke because he liked the silence. His Evanston house looked different now. Not renovated, not redesigned for admiration, simply lived in. The boxes Penelope had left behind were gone. The formal dining room had become a small workshop with 2 monitors, a soldering station, and shelves filled with engineering books. The guest bedroom held a desk for the college students Kevin mentored on Saturday mornings. He had removed the expensive decorative furniture Penelope once chose from magazines. In its place stood practical chairs, warm lamps, and a second-hand bookcase that leaned slightly to the left. The house finally felt honest. Kevin made coffee and opened the back door. Cool air entered from the yard. Chicago winter had surrendered slowly, leaving damp soil, bare branches, and the first signs of green along the fence. He stood there for several minutes. No phone in his hand, no reports, no encrypted messages. The quiet no longer felt empty. That surprised him most. For months after Penelope left, silence had seemed like evidence of absence. Now it felt like ownership. At 7, Kevin drove toward downtown Chicago. The Camry remained reliable. The heater made a faint clicking sound. The passenger side window lowered more slowly than before. Richard had offered to replace it 3 times. Kevin had refused 3 times. A 4th offer would probably come soon. He parked in the same public garage 2 blocks from Calloway Dynamics and entered through the main lobby. The security officer greeted him by name. Morning, Mr. Perez. Morning, Anthony. Employees crossed the marble floor carrying coffee backpacks and conversations that stopped whenever someone tried to pass through the turnstiles too quickly. The new security process added 11 seconds to entry. Kevin knew because someone had measured it. Complaints had ended after the first month. Habits adapted faster than people predicted. On the 18th floor, the system's integrity office was already active. No executive furniture, no private reception area, no walls designed to make visitors feel small. Samuel Brooks sat at a long table reviewing an investigation summary. A young analyst named Maya Thompson was explaining a vendor anomaly to 2 accountants. On another screen, a regional manager from Texas attended an ethics training session. Kevin entered without announcement. Samuel looked up. "You're late." Kevin checked the clock. "By 40 seconds. I was worried power had changed you." Kevin placed his briefcase on the table. "Anything urgent? Nothing criminal." "That sounds promising. It's disappointing." Samuel handed him a report. A manufacturing subsidiary had purchased equipment from a company partially owned by the plant director's brother. The equipment was necessary. The price was fair. The conflict had not been disclosed. 6 months earlier, the discovery might have become a quiet warning. Now it triggered a formal review. Kevin read the file. Did the plant director cooperate immediately? Any evidence he influenced the price number? Then document the conflict, require competitive bidding, and retrain the regional leadership team. Samuel raised an eyebrow. No public execution. Not today. Soft. Proportionate. Samuel smiled. The company had learned that accountability did not require equal punishment for unequal conduct. Mistakes could be corrected. Deception required deeper consequences. Systems became stronger when people understood the difference. At 9, Kevin attended the quarterly board meeting. Victoria Calloway sat at the head of the table. She had changed less than the company around her. Still precise. Still prepared. Still willing to challenge anyone who spoke too confidently. The difference appeared in the room. Directors now received reports from employees several levels below senior management. Risk presentations included uncertainty instead of hiding it. Every major proposal contained a section titled, "What could make this wrong?" Kevin had suggested the wording. Several consultants hated it. Employees understood it immediately. Victoria opened the meeting. Before financial results, we will review integrity metrics. No one objected. 6 months earlier, ethics had appeared near the end of board agendas. Now it came first. Samuel reported 32 completed investigations, 21 policy corrections, 4 disciplinary actions, 1 executive resignation, no evidence of organized fraud. Maya presented trends from anonymous employee reports. The number of reports had increased, retaliation complaints had decreased, resolution times had fallen by nearly half. One director looked concerned. Should we consider the increase in complaints a negative signal? Kevin answered, no. Why not? Because silence was never proof that nothing was wrong. The director nodded slowly. Kevin continued. The purpose of a reporting system is not to produce fewer reports. It is to reveal problems while they are still small. Victoria glanced at him. That sentence appeared in the official minutes. After the meeting, she joined Kevin beside the windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The water stretched beyond the city in a flat, gray-blue line. I received another letter from the prosecutors, she said. About Vance. He accepted a plea agreement. Kevin remained quiet. Bradley did too. What about Penelope? Her cooperation reduced the recommended sentence. Kevin looked toward the lake. He had not asked for updates about her. Still, he had known they would eventually arrive. Victoria continued carefully. She provided access to accounts Bradley believed she had forgotten. That helped recover money, almost $9 million. Kevin nodded. That matters. Victoria studied him. You don't want to know anything else? No. There was no anger in the answer, only a boundary. He had forgiven enough to stop carrying the injury. Forgiveness did not require reopening the door. Victoria accepted that. My father is visiting today. Kevin turned. He didn't mention it. He wanted to surprise you. That sounds inefficient. It's retirement. He's abusing it. Richard arrived shortly before noon, wearing a navy sweater instead of a suit. No assistant followed him. No driver carried his coat. He walked through the main entrance and waited in line at security like everyone else. Anthony asked him to remove his watch before passing through the scanner. Richard looked personally offended, then pleased. The system did not recognize founders as exceptions. Kevin met him near the elevators. You set this up, Richard said. I approved the policy. My own building searched me, Victoria's building. Richard smiled. You've been waiting 6 months to say that? Longer. They ate lunch in the employee cafeteria. Richard chose soup. Kevin chose grilled chicken. No reserved table appeared. A group of interns sat nearby, discussing a software problem. One of them recognized Richard, but was too nervous to approach. Richard noticed. Should I say hello? No. Why, they're solving something. So you'll interrupt them. Richard looked wounded. I built this company? Then let them work. Richard laughed loudly enough that the interns looked over. The nervous student finally approached. Her name was Elena Morales. 21 years old, engineering scholarship recipient, first person in her family to attend college. She introduced herself to Richard, then turned toward Kevin. Mr. Perez, I attended your Saturday session last month. Kevin remembered her code. You were building the access monitoring tool. She looked surprised. You remember, it generated too many alerts. Her smile disappeared slightly. I fixed that. How I separated unusual behavior from harmful behavior. Kevin nodded once. Good. Richard watched the exchange. The young woman thanked them and returned to her table. She wanted praise, Richard said. She wanted to know whether the work mattered. Did you answer her yes? You said one word. It was the right word. Richard shook his head. You continue to be exhausting. After lunch, they walked through the employee training center. One classroom held a group of new managers studying ethical decision-making. Another held cybersecurity exercises. In the largest room, 15 high school students worked on donated laptops. Calloway Dynamics had expanded its community technology program after the foundation's finances were rebuilt. No ceremonial building, no expensive rendering, no fictional innovation center, real classrooms, real equipment, real instructors. The foundation no longer announced projects before funding them. Every public promise linked to a visible budget and verified completion report. Kevin stopped near the doorway. Elena was helping one student repair a coding error. Richard stood beside him. You did this. No. Kevin pointed toward the room. They did. You created the program. I created controls around the funding. That is less inspiring. It is also true. Richard looked at the students. Truth can be inspiring, sometimes. They left the building shortly after 4. Instead of returning home, Richard asked Kevin to drive toward the lake. They stopped at a quiet section of shoreline north of the city. The afternoon had cleared. Sunlight moved across the water in narrow silver bands. They walked slowly along the path. Richard's pace had changed since retirement, not weak, simply unhurried. For decades, every step had led toward a meeting, a decision, or a problem. Now he sometimes walked without needing to arrive anywhere. How is retirement? Kevin asked. Terrible. Kevin waited. I sleep better. Sounds terrible. I read. Unfortunate. I have discovered that most books contain no executive summary. That must be difficult. Richard laughed. They reached a bench facing the water. Richard sat. Kevin remained standing for a moment, then joined him. I've been thinking about the first time we met, Richard said. During the attack. After. Richard looked across the lake. I offered you money because I believed every debt could be measured. Kevin remembered the check. 7 figures. Enough to change his life. At the time, he had refused because accepting it felt like selling a decision he had already made. You refused, Richard continued. That bothered me. I noticed. I thought you were proud. I was tired. Richard smiled. Later I understood. Kevin waited. You didn't want the reward to rewrite the reason you helped. That was close enough. Richard removed an envelope from his coat. Kevin looked at it. No, you haven't opened it. You brought an envelope to a conversation about a refused check. It is not a check. Kevin accepted it reluctantly. Inside was a single document. The Kevin Perez Systems Integrity Fellowship, a program funding cybersecurity and ethics training for students from working-class families. No personal payment, no statue, no office carrying his name. Only scholarships, mentorships, and paid internships. Kevin read the first page. You used my name. You can remove it. I might? I assumed so. Kevin continued reading. The program required each recipient to complete public interest work before graduation. Not unpaid labor, paid service. Community organizations would receive cybersecurity assistance. Students would receive experience. The fellowship would be managed independently from Richard and the company. Kevin closed the document. "This is good." Richard turned toward him. The words meant more than applause would have. "I hoped so." They remained beside the lake until the sun lowered. Richard eventually left in a hired car. Kevin stayed. The path grew quieter. Evening light turned the skyline into a distant silhouette. 6 months earlier, Kevin had stood inside an empty house believing his life had been reduced to what others had taken from him: his job, his marriage, his certainty. Then the phone rang. A billionaire's call had opened a door. But the call had not saved him. Richard had offered an opportunity. Kevin's choices afterward had created the life that followed. He had refused quick accusations, refused revenge, refused easy answers. He had trusted records over appearances, patience over panic, truth over the temporary comfort of believing what he wanted to believe. Those decisions had cost him sleep, comfort, and the last illusions he carried about people he once trusted. They had also given him something stronger: peace without denial. Kevin's phone vibrated. A message from Elena. The access monitoring tool passed its final test. False alerts reduced by 70%. She asked whether he could review the results on Saturday. Kevin replied with one word: "Yes." He slipped the phone back into his pocket. The sun reached the horizon. Lake Michigan reflected pale gold. No reporters waited. No board applauded. No one announced that justice had been served. A few runners passed behind him. A father taught his daughter to ride a bicycle near the path. Gulls moved above the water. Ordinary life continued without knowing how close a powerful company had come to collapse. Kevin stood and adjusted his coat. Before leaving, he looked across the lake one final time. He had spent years believing quiet men were overlooked because they lacked power. Now he understood the deeper truth. Quiet was not weakness. Patience was not surrender. Restraint was not fear. A man did not need to announce his value for it to exist. And he did not need everyone to recognize it. Only the right people, at the right moment, for the right reason. Kevin turned toward home as the first lights appeared along the shoreline. His victory was not the position waiting for him Monday morning. It was not the criminals facing judgment. It was not the apology Penelope had offered too late. His victory was simpler. He no longer needed the past to become different before he could move forward. The road ahead was quiet. This time he welcomed it. Kevin's journey reminds us that losing what we thought defined us can sometimes reveal who we truly are. A job title can disappear. A marriage can end. People we trusted may walk away when our life no longer looks impressive. But our real value does not vanish simply because someone fails to recognize it. Character is built in the quiet moments when no one is applauding, when we choose patience over anger, truth over revenge, and careful action over desperate reaction. Kevin did not win because he became richer or more powerful than the people who betrayed him. He won because he refused to let betrayal turn him into someone bitter, reckless, or dishonest. He understood that silence is not weakness, restraint is not fear, and patience is not surrender. Sometimes the strongest response is not to argue with those who underestimate us, but to keep preparing until the truth can speak for itself. This story also teaches us that healing does not always mean returning to what was lost. Sometimes healing means accepting that an apology can be sincere and still arrive too late. Moving forward does not require the past to change. It only requires us to stop allowing the past to control our future. What lesson from Kevin's story touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy emotional stories about betrayal, justice, resilience, and quiet victories, subscribe to the channel and join us for the next powerful story.